We're going to begin. This meeting is a public session of the Council Rock School Board of School Directors. This meeting is being recorded by the Council Rock School District and may be recorded by members of the audience. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Abramson?
Here.
Mrs. Brooks?
Here.
Mr. Bialik?
Here.
Dr. Foster?
Here.
Mr. Grupp?
Present.
Mrs. McKessie?
Here.
Mrs. Sexton?
Present.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. Block?
Here.
Mr. Klein, Superintendent's report.
Other than to wish everyone a happy summer, no superintendent's report right now.
Okay. So we will move on to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We would ask that you limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Please consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching this broadcast live on CRTV when speaking. It's our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that members of the community will have an equal opportunity to address the board without interruption. While the board welcomes your ideas and will consider them in deliberating an issue, we may not respond to your comments or questions. So a few technical things. I have a sign-up sheet for the people who have signed in. I will call them first. If you'd like to comment additionally, it will be open at the end, fear not. When you come to the mic, please clearly state your name and the town that you're from. There is also a timer, so you can have an idea of your 3 minutes. Feel free, if you're in agreement with a previous speaker, to state that, and then anything additional. We do understand that many of you may be here for a similar topic and may basically be in agreement, but you have your 3 minutes to say whatever you'd like. So I'm going to start with William Janisis?
Bill Jennings.
I'm sorry. Thank you. You can say it into the mic so they can get it right officially.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Bill Jennings from Richboro. Do you want, okay, you guys are going to start then. Okay, great. So I'd first like to say I've had the opportunity to review the preliminary recommendations. I completely understand these are recommendations. There's 2 issues that I've taken away that I'd like to address the board today. First, my oldest daughter currently goes to Rolling Hills, and of course the ideal scenario would be that Rolling Hills does not close. But if it does, you know, I agree that the board, and in terms of, you know, providing the best economic feasibility for Council Rock well into the future is in the best interest of the community. Me and my wife are both Council Rock graduates, so I just look forward to, you know, the long term, and that's why we live in this community. But taking a look at the current map of Rolling Hills, there's a cutoff, and we currently live in a neighborhood called Northampton Crossing, which is right on Holland Road across from Council Rock South. That neighborhood goes to Rolling Hills today. And as a common theme throughout the recommendations, what I've noticed is a straight line comes down Holland Road. Now it's pretty easy, obviously, to put a straight line on a map. When you're taking a look at it, you're not taking kids into consideration. Right now, my daughter's going into 1st grade. My other daughter will be coming into kindergarten very soon. And if you take a look at 2, 3, 4 years down the road, to have 1 or 2 streets that are not part of the entire move to a new school, I think is completely unfair. Of course, kids can adapt, and of course, kids can, if they're moving into a new school, they can understand that and make their changes. But if you're asking one subset, 2 streets, to not be included into that change, I think that's not fair. You know, you have 4 or 5 years of making friends, and they are the only ones that are not moving with their friends. Listen, if it gets cut in half, and half the school moves to one other district, as it's saying to go almost all of Rolling Hills to go to Hillcrest, I understand that, but for just 1 or 2 streets and not go to Hillcrest, I find that completely unfair. And like I said, if you cut it in half and they split it up, I understand that. The second common theme throughout the recommendations that I absolutely disagree with is the fact that we live right here on Shelbourne Road. Here is Council Rock South. In the common theme throughout the recommendations, our kids would be moved to Council Rock North. Now, I graduated from North, and I don't have any problems with it, but the fact that me and my wife moved from Newtown to be in Northampton and to be in an area that is a little tighter and a little bit tighter knit of a Richboro and Holland community, that's a specific reason that we moved to this house in Northampton. So to ask my children who could physically walk across the street to Council Rock South to have to get on a bus and go to Council Rock North not only creates a risk, obviously a low risk in riding a bus, but why would you move them and put them in an area where all of their friends are one street away, but they're going to be going to Council Rock North with kids from Washington's Crossing? And again, I went to Council Rock North. There's nothing wrong with that, but this is the specific reason, and our kids can walk to the high school. So I hope to take my two concerns to heart, and I appreciate your time. And that was exactly 3 minutes.
Very good. That's very, very good. The next person is Amy McIntyre.
Good evening. So I'm Amy McIntyre, and I'm here to speak about the proposals. The way I found out about the proposal to close Wrightstown Elementary School is that one person shared one link of an article on Facebook. If that one person hadn't shared that article, or I had somehow missed it, I may still not know that my children's future elementary school was at risk for closure. And then I realized there were probably many people in the community just like me, blissfully unaware. So I decided to create a petition, and following that, a Facebook page. I am not a connected person. My roots to this area are not deep. I don't even have school-aged children. But in a matter of 2.5 weeks, we have over 900 signatures on a petition and nearly 500 Facebook likes. And I have heard many times from people that they first heard about the proposals when we received an email about our petition. The people who have signed the petition vary from baby boomers who graduated from Wrightstown Elementary School in the 60s to tweens who graduated last year. I've heard from families who have several generations of Wrightstown graduates. I've heard from people new to our area who just bought homes so their children may attend Wrightstown Elementary. I've heard from grandparents on behalf of their grandkids. I've heard from people considering a career move to our area who are now looking closer before deciding. It is truly incredible the depth and breadth of support I have seen. I have created a folder for each of the board members which contains 149 comments from the petition. You will not hear from everyone tonight, but this gives you a chance to really see the feedback from your constituents on the proposed school closing. And I would like to ask, if you're here on behalf of Wrightstown, could you please raise your hand so that the board has an idea? I want to apologize to the Capital Planning Committee. I'm so sorry we couldn't love your proposals. I know you must have put a tremendous amount of work into your suggestions to the board, and given what you were charged with, you delivered. My criticism would perhaps be we need to reconsider the charge. The majority of our nation's schools are old, built to accommodate baby boomers going to elementary school. Districts all over are feeling the financial squeeze. I hold a degree in economics, and in my former life, I was a medical sales rep responsible for a multi-state, multi-million-dollar territory. I am sensitive to the financials. I get it. But even the most fiscally conservative among us do not want services to be cut. They want service providers to get creative and find ways to be efficient and do more with less. I wish the charge from the board had been to ask the committee to get creative, come up with some out-of-the-box ideas that can help the district generate revenue in unorthodox ways while never sacrificing the quality of our children's educations. Closing Wrightstown Elementary School would be cutting services. It would be detrimental to the educations of as many children as 3 elementary schools would take on the Wrightstown refugees. The good news is the district is known for its academic excellence, led by a strong board and superintendent. And it is very clear to me that the schools have the overwhelming support and involvement from the community. If you would give me just a few more, like 1 more minute, because I really put a lot of work into having the community so involved. It's very clear to me that the schools have the overwhelming support and involvement from the community, so this is a recipe for success. We have the opportunity to be the district that demonstrates to others how this should be done. Between our leadership, our excellent educators, and our community support, Council Rock can come up with unique answers to the financial concerns of the district and be an example to districts all over the country. Closing and consolidating is the easy way out. It is not the right thing to do, and it is not the example we want to set. I would like to ask the board to keep us informed into next steps and share with us what your decision-making process will be like, and in the meantime, consider a do-over.
Scott McInburney, or McBurney? Sorry, I think I added an A. McBurney?
My name's Scott McBurney, Wrightstown Township. I actually have quite a long route, Bucks County in general. I'm a graduate of Central Bucks School District. I worked in that school district for a little while. I lived in Newtown for approximately 8 years and just recently moved to Wrightstown. Part of the reason we decided to move to Wrightstown was we have a young son that will be going there in a couple of years. And through talking with people already in the district, teachers that we know through our daycare that are currently teachers at Wrightstown Elementary, it's an awesome school. It scores excellent. Everybody seems to love it. The community stands behind it. And that's what I want for my son. I'm also a product of a small school. I know everybody seems to like bigger is better these days. I tend to not agree. Kids, especially of the younger age, elementary school age, I believe they are better off in a smaller school environment where the teachers, the staff, other children know them more. When I graduated my high school from East, I sat there and I looked at people and I was like, I don't know you, I don't know you, I've never seen you. I don't know if that's the best way for kids to learn an environment where they don't know half of their schoolmates. And when we have super schools, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, that are thousands, I don't think that's the best way. From a property owner standpoint in Wrightstown, it's the closest school. I'm not sure it's all that efficient to be closing a school and be trucking all these kids all over the rest of the districts. I tend to be environmentally oriented, and all the extra busing costs, and us having to drive the kids to a different school potentially, I don't agree with it. And I'm hoping you guys will reconsider this. And I'm not saying just this for elementary, I'm saying this across the board. I don't really want to see any schools closed. I'm just a proponent of finding a different solution with what we have. And similar to what Amy said before me, I hope going forward the board keeps the public well informed of what's going on, because like her, I only found this out through an email chain. And had I not seen it or any of the stuff on Facebook, I'd be as much in the dark as she was. So please consider keeping us well informed in the future. Thank you.
Sally?
You're not going to try?
Rosengarten?
Yes, there you go.
Ah.
Sally Rosengarten from Richboro.
Thank you.
I'm a neighbor of Bill Giannini. He spoke first. I have two issues with this proposal. One, my kids go to Rolling Hills, and you're looking at splitting Rolling Hills by a couple of neighborhoods that would continue on to Richboro Elementary. I understand eventually Rolling Hills might shut down. I think it's a wonderful small school. But here's my problem. Richboro Elementary would then go on to Newtown Middle, and then Council Rock North. As Bill said, you go out at our bus stop, right on our road, you can walk across the street and there's the high school. We play sports on the high school. I sent you each an email showing a picture of literally how close we are from the high school. So that makes no sense. Big part of high school, when these kids get to high school, is extracurricular activities, staying extra for classes, doing other clubs. You're making a whole community of kids. All the neighborhoods who live behind us, that development, are now dependent on busing, getting rides, other forms of transportation, where right now they have the convenience of walking, that easy accessibility. You are making a hardship to that community that does not need it, who is operating fine as it is and going to south. It's right there. It's not logical. When I was reading the proposal, you used the software redistricting analysis, Decision Insight, to make moderate projections. Well, this software is not logical. It's causing a neighborhood, a community, to go to a different high school. That doesn't make sense, to go to a different middle school. So those are my two big issues. The fact that you're taking Richboro Elementary and have it go to Newtown and then Newtown North. That's not where we live. That's not where we chose to live. We chose to live in a community where we have access, have everything close by. So those are my two main things, like I said. And back to Rolling Hills. Having just a couple of neighborhoods go to a different school and the rest of the school go on to Hillcrest. you know, you think about that. Does that make sense? To split it that way, it's not 50-50 as Bill said. Anyways, I hope you consider, and I hope you use good logic and look at the big picture. And do you really want a whole community who's neighboring the high school go to a different town? Does that make sense? People are going to, I don't know, question, do I want to live there? Anyway, thank you.
John Boothman? Bill Kronberger?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bill Kronberger. I wasn't prepared to speak tonight, so I didn't really formally put anything together. Just want to give you a little bit of our opinion. My wife and I moved into Newtown last year, specifically for our children's education. We currently have a 1 and a 3-year-old. We looked to the Council Rock School District because we, heard such great things about it and know it's a great institution. More specifically, we narrowed down to Wrightstown Elementary because we heard so many great things about the school, the small class size, and the personal care from the teachers. I've heard that the principal walks around and knows everybody in the school. And to hear that they're thinking about closing that school is very upsetting to us. From what I understand, it's one of the best elementary schools in the community, if not the best elementary school. So to close that, I understand it's older and maybe it needs some retrofitting, but we would be really upset if that happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Judith Richardson?
Good evening. I'm Judith Richardson. I live in Wycombe. I have 2 daughters who went to Wrightstown Elementary. My youngest is 20, so I've been out for a while. My husband still tutors there. We're very connected to the community, and I just wanted to say a few things on behalf of smaller schools. Compared with larger schools, students in smaller schools fight less, feel safer, come to school more frequently, and report being more attached to their school. Small schools, have been shown to have conditions necessary for improvement in professional climates. Teachers feel more committed to their jobs and more affectatious in their work. Smaller schools are more engaging environments and produce greater gains in student achievement. Learning is more equitably distributed in smaller schools. Students are known, encouraged, and supported. Larger and larger schools have failed to result in an economy of scale or to provide lower pupil costs. Seldom considered are there costs associated with larger schools that can't be brought down to strictly money terms. Increased disciplinary problems, a decreased sense of social safety and connectedness, lower teacher satisfaction and higher turnover, less achievement, and less happiness. I hope you consider what everybody has to say and think of something more creative rather than closing Wrightstown Elementary. Thank you.
Rick Statler?
I was unaware that there was going to be a hearing on school closings, so I think I'm going to get out of Dodge before the artillery comes in, and I will return when it's all quiet on the Western Front.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure we'll see you again.
Wise decision.
Kim Brzella? No comment. Okay. Alex Brzella?
No further comment.
Thank you. There are 3 lines, and it just says redistricting, so I'm going to skip those again. If you want to speak, there'll be an opportunity for anyone in the audience at the end. Tim Downs?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Downs, and I live in Richboro. I hope everyone here today can see how strongly and passionately everyone feels about Council Rock School District. And everyone cares very deeply about their own schools. Everyone loves them, and everyone wants to keep them. And I totally get that. My group was responsible for recommendation number 1, which was posted out on the website, and I hope everyone read, because we did put a lot of time and effort into that. I will say that my 2 oldest went to Richboro Middle School, and I have a youngest in Richboro Elementary, and my proposal was to close Richboro Middle, so she'd be impacted by that. We also would have to drive past Council Rock High School South to go to Council Rock High School North. I get that. Doesn't make me very popular at home, but nonetheless, it is a fact that has to be addressed. The board has a very tough decision, and that's what needs to be addressed by everyone here. The population of students is shrinking, and our facilities have allotted deferred maintenance, and it's only growing. To do nothing is, to me, the worst thing that can be done. Action has to be taken. Everything in that proposal and every recommendation is not pushing anything beyond the boundaries of what we've already done. I've heard about schools getting too big and dangerous. By combining Richboro Middle with Holland Middle, the school is no bigger than Newtown Middle. So are we saying Newtown Middle is a threat and a danger to our students? They're not. All the schools in Council Rock are fantastic. Whether my kid goes to Richboro Middle or they wind up going to Holland Middle, it's still a fantastic district, and I'm very happy to be into this school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Deseru? You'll pass? Okay. So that's the end of the people signed in the beginning. If you'd like to speak, please approach the mic. Please, again, give your name and your town. And would anybody like to come forward? You can line up behind here so we can just run through people too, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm Jenny Schottmiller of Wrightstown. First, I want to say I appreciate the effort the board is taking to plan, look to the future. Obviously, savings, being operationally efficient while remaining good schools is very important, and I understand that, but I do have some concerns. One is when I'm reading the recommendations, I have more confidence in the cost of estimates than the savings estimates. After being a CPA for many years, I just didn't have a feeling when I read all the different recommendations that these savings estimates have dug into as deeply as they may need to be. I'd like there to be more research done on the savings over the long term before you make a decision to close Wrightstown Elementary, so that you have all the information you need to make a really good decision for our schools. I agree that our schools are great, Wrightstown's great, all Council Rock schools are great. But we want to remain that way, and we have to make decisions on more than just cost. So, as well as make sure that our estimates are accurate. If Wrightstown's closed, but it continues to be used for other services, there's savings listed in some of the recommendations that won't be incurred because they're going to be still used. And those things like the sewer or whatever, you're still going to have to do that. Also, I don't think there's been much looked at in terms of the home values in Wrightstown and the number of people that moved there specifically because they heard so many great things about Wrightstown Elementary School, or they want the small school. That would impact taxes. Also, that needs to be looked at. One of the references in recommendation 1 is that it was referred to an article which stated that students from affluent backgrounds tend to perform better when housed in larger settings. When I read that article, the thing that stuck out to me was that it was about number of studies, and the summary from that article read, asked the question and answered it. What size should a school be to optimize learning and teaching while striving for cost efficiency and operation? After numerous studies, the answer is yet to be found. I caution using this article as evidence that closing Wrightstown is necessary. 3 children in my family have transitioned from Wrightstown Elementary to Newtown Middle. They did great. Maybe they took a couple extra days. We all know transitioning to middle school is not easy. They do fine. Transportation. My children from Wrightstown are the last to get picked up and the last to get dropped off. If you look at the map, Wrightstown's really big, even though we're the smallest school. My small children going into 2nd grade are on the bus 45 to 50 minutes every day after school. Newtown might only be 10 minutes down the road on the map, but you're now saying more than an hour on the bus at the end of the day, plus you're extending their morning commute. To me, that's a much bigger deal than them having a couple extra days to transition to middle school. What I really want to know is how much research has been done into the alternate ways to increase efficiency at a small school, as well as whether these savings are really going to be realized. Also, the impact to the Wrightstown community needs to be looked at further, as well as transportation. We're a great school district. We need to consider cost, but we also have to look at much more than cost if we want to remain a great school district.
Good evening. My name's Amy Fitzpatrick. I live in Ivyland. I apologize in advance for not having prepared remarks. I speak presumptively on behalf of a very small subset of Wrightstown students who live in Northampton Township. The potential closure of Wrightstown, if I read the proposals correctly, not only redistricts our anticipated elementary school, it redistricts our anticipated middle school and our anticipated high school. I'm not from here. I moved here from San Francisco for my children's education. I chose very carefully, very, very carefully where I wanted my kids to go to school. I chose a small environment. I fell in love with the model of Wrightstown, a small school, private school, like people said, very loving, attentive environment. I don't mean to take anything away from any other school in Council Rock, which I know to be amazing, but I made a decision as a parent about what was the best educational model for my child. I don't believe in a cookie cutter approach. I think it's the wrong model for our students and for this district. It seems very short-sighted to me to say each school needs to be exactly the same size only for efficiency's sake. There's a lot more to it than that. I like that parents have a choice in our district, that if they have the luxury, like I did, of choosing where they want to live, that they could choose a larger school, that they could choose a school in a borough, that they could choose a small school. I chose a small school, and after a move across the country, I hope you can understand my restrained emotion in that not only one school might close for my kids, but that I would have an entirely different education than I had planned for my kids. Each family is different. Some of us have very unique reasons why a small school might be the most appropriate for our children. I have a child with life-threatening food allergies. I don't believe she's actually even going to be able to ride the bus because it's not safe for her presently. I would like to be as close as possible to her school. I would like to be as involved as possible at her school. That's just my family's story. And I think each family here has their own reasons and passions for why they believe not just Wrightstown, but perhaps other schools need to remain open. I think there are a variety of ways in which our district could restructure its finances to achieve cost efficiencies. I think we have an amazing district. I think we need to reward our teachers as best as possible, but if our property taxes are going up to cover the pensions of retired teachers, we are losing the value of our homes because of our increased property taxes. To then have to deal with closing schools is a lot to take as a parent. I appreciate that you have a difficult task, and I ask not only that you help keep us informed, but that you continue to let parents be involved in the process. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Jason Funk. I live in Wrightstown. First, I wanted just to echo briefly the one woman's comment about property taxes. No one's, or not property taxes, home prices, home values. No one's looked into that. But that's completely second thought in my mind. I mean, in my mind, I could care less what happens to the price of my home. What matters to me is the education of my children. I have 3 children. One already goes to Wrightstown. He's going into 3rd grade. I have another who's going into kindergarten starting this year. And then I have a daughter who's 3 years old who would be going on as well to Wrightstown. We moved here specifically for Wrightstown Elementary, specifically. I've been in Bucks County all my life. We specifically moved to Wrightstown for the school. With that being said, another thing I want to echo is communication. I truly, truly, truly do not believe that this board has communicated to the community themselves what exactly is going on here. I know of several individuals who had absolutely no idea what's going on here. And this isn't just about the closure of Wrightstown Elementary or the closure of Rolling Hills. This is about a complete redistricting. The folks in Eagleton Farms, I know individuals there who are completely unaware that their kids will no longer be going to Soul Finestone, that they will be going to Newtown. Same thing in Rosefield. Their kids will not be going to Soul Finestone any longer. They'll be going to Newtown. They're unaware of this. This is bigger than just these two schools. This is the entire district. So I would suggest that in the future, and as you discuss these decisions, that you communicate much more with your constituents. And then in closing, all due respect, sir, to your firm, but a school district is not about, in my mind, the first thing on your mind should not be saving money. It should be about educating your children. And in the children's formative years, the last thing you want to be doing is breaking up the friendships that they have used. My child is in 3rd grade. He has friends there that you're going to be now splitting up and sending to 3 different schools. Number one of these children, not saving money. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Adrian Vance. I graduated from Council Rock North before it was North. And after that, I proceeded to move to Florida with my husband, and I taught for 13 years down there. When I found out I was pregnant, we decided that even teaching in Florida, this was the place to raise my child. So we moved back home, worked out a transfer, came all the way back here, and specifically, like so many others, chose Wrightstown Elementary, Newtown Middle School, and Council Rock North as it is now. You know, we went to the top end of our budget to purchase the house we did. We took on the extra burden of the taxes because Wrightstown taxes are significantly more than what we were looking at in other areas, specifically for our daughter's education. I have my child's in 3rd grade. We picked the school because, like so many of the other Wrightstown parents have said, it's a community. It is, she knows everybody in the school, everybody knows her, they all get along, and that is how we wanted her raised. We wanted her raised in a close-knit community that she knows all the kids. She may not live right next door. It may be a little walk since there is a distance between houses, but she still has that closeness, and she's not a number. I've taught in the giant number schools, and I know the difference. I've experienced the difference on both ends of what it's like to be in large school and the small school. And we've taken on that financial burden and everything to provide our child with a very specific life and how we want her to grow up. And the closing of Wrightstown, like others have mentioned, you know, I discovered by word of mouth also, and it's very upsetting because I'm proud of Council Rock. I've graduated, you know, it's the district I love, but to not feel informed, that was a bother. And then to top it off, to hear that, you know, there aren't really exploration of other methods to see what we can do. It's just an automatically, we're going to close these schools, and, you know, these kids are going to have to figure out where they're going and who their new friends are is very disturbing as a parent. And I just wanted to give a personal voice. I have a couple other mothers that have small children that also go to Wrightstown and have babies that are, you know, they couldn't pull away to come tonight, so I've represented them. But we wanted to be heard, like so many other people here today, that there should be other alternatives, and that's not just a quick fix, even though it may seem like it is. Thank you.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm here.
Well, oh, sorry.
Sorry. Do you subscribe to the district's listserv?
I do.
Okay.
I do. And I saw the email, that's how I got it, and I actually was one that sent a couple of text messages out when I got the email about the district meeting to other people who were unaware.
Okay.
So,
I'm just trying to figure out the effectiveness of that.
Right. Well,
listserv.
I think the problem that we've found is the district does send a lot of information about a variety of things, right. And then we do get information from Wrightstown and other sources too. So I think in the bombardment, something as important like this should be somehow flagged as, I think, significant issue, and it tends to get lost within all of the other items that are listed on the thing. And I think it should be somehow, you know, highlighted or capitalized on more. I think unless you sit there and read, and, you know, so many of the parents here, they have 1 or 2 or more kids running around and working full time. You skim through that stuff, but if you're not looking for, nobody's thinking, oh, I need to look to see if they're redistricting or closing my school this week, it may not catch your eye. And I think that's where a lot of the parents feel it's an issue, that we may get it, but it's not brought really to front and attention.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Daniels, and I'm a resident of Wrightstown. I'd first like to thank all the committees who worked on this difficult project. It is a great deal. Looking forward to the future of this district and what it represents. As a former consultant, this is exactly the kind of report that I would have generated. It looks at a lot of costs and figures, but to me what's missing from this, which is an integral part of the Council Rock experience, was an in-depth look at the proportionate impact on different communities that some of these proposals would affect. For example, as a Wrightstown resident, unlike our neighboring townships of Northampton, Upper Makefield, and Newtown, we don't have community-based teams. We don't have a community recreation center, a local Y. We don't have a place where our residents congregate and meet one another, except in the heart of our community, which is Wrightstown Elementary School. That is the way that we form relationships with one another. We don't have many neighborhoods. Instead, that's the place where we learn about our neighbors. Who needs help from our community? How can we get together to support one another? That's the way that we form our friendships over time. Moving here from Georgia, there are people in this room who were my first friends in this area that I met through the school introduction process. By bifurcating our community among different schools, we risk losing some of the heart of that community because people won't have those interactions. So while I realize that there are difficult financial considerations that this board needs to consider, I urge you to please take a look at that community piece in depth and think very carefully before disproportionately impacting one of our communities, especially a township that is vulnerable on the fringes. We won't have a place for our people to congregate and to gather if our residents are split up into 3 different schools. I'd also like to advocate for the rebuild of the Newtown Middle School as put forth in the proposal. I think the middle schools are something that hopefully more of the residents can agree need something addressed, giving the school board enough time to make careful consideration of the best flow for our elementary students. My son is transitioning now from Wrightstown to the middle school. He will have spent over a week making ready for that transition. If we were to close, if the board were to close Wrightstown Elementary this year, our children, my daughter who's entering 5th grade, who's already had her 4th principal over that period of time, would be looking at yet another transition. During those primary education years, where consistency of teachers who can track her development, who can watch their growth span, might again be negatively impacted. And we'd be giving our youngest students in this district less time to acclimate than our older students to a completely new experience where they wouldn't be surrounded necessarily by their friends that they've made over those years. So I please urge you to consider community and transition time as you make this difficult decision. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Mike Rosengarten. I didn't plan on speaking, so I apologize if it's not very eloquent. One of the things I disagree with the person from Richborough who said that he helped make the proposal to push people from our neighborhood going to North. You guys put out something that shows the student population current and the student population 2017-18 for both Council Rock South and Council Rock North. South is decreasing by almost 300 to 400 students. North is only decreasing by about 100 students. It looks like Council Rock South actually has the capacity to still keep all these people in the same school district. And it looks like you're trying to prop up basically Council Rock North. I don't understand that. Council Rock South is a humongous school. It does have the ability to still take in our neighborhoods. That's the only thing I want to say. Thank you.
I guess I'm last. My name's Sarah Greenstein. I have a daughter who's going to be entering 1st grade in Rolling Hills, and I have a 4-year-old son. My comments are a little bit different in terms of closing school. My concern is about the lack of full-day kindergarten that's currently in the district or not currently in the district. And what strength or, what focus has been thought about with that and closing schools. We don't even have full-day kindergarten, and now we're closing schools, so maybe full-day kindergarten won't even happen, and how Council Rock is going to stay competitive, and when there's surrounding districts around us, most of them do have full-day kindergarten. These children that are, have full-day kindergarten could potentially be going into first grade as being at more of an advantage than our children in Council Rock that do not have full-day kindergarten. I'm a full-time working mom. I used the Champions program this year, which was a pilot type of thing that currently happened. It was okay. It wasn't great, but it fit my needs at that particular time. But I think to stay current and to have our children at the same advantage of surrounding districts, I think the board needs to take a closer look at full-day kindergarten, the impact it has on our children. So before they close schools, to take that into consideration.
My name's Craig Leeser. I live in Wrightstown. My situation might be a little different than most of the people. I went to Wrightstown. My brother went to Wrightstown, so I went through the whole system. My wife went to Rolling Hills. She went through North. I went through North. So it's a little disappointing that it's getting closed. It was a special school then. It's a special school now. It really doesn't make sense. I understand financially it makes sense. I'm not going to argue or even comment on his report. I don't have the ability to. I'm sure it's accurate. It's probably the best thing the district should do financially. I don't know if it's the right thing for the district to do. Anyway, I don't think everyone was informed. That's why there's practically no one here. I expected large crowds. I'm shocked that there's not many people here. The thing I'd like to talk about is that everyone's here now because you've stirred something up. You're proposing to build a stadium in South, and now there's going to be a pool built at South, I guess. So my question is when, since we're here now, or when is the next meeting? Because when is North going to be closed? I'm sure that's what's next, correct? No? I see everyone shaking their heads.
You're sure, So, sir, we're going to have a presentation where we're going to review everything that's happened, but what's happened to date is in a summary, is we've formed a committee. They broke into 3 parts. They were charged with making 3 different recommendations, and they've been presented to this board. There's been no vote. There's been no recommendation.
Okay.
Nothing. We are in the very beginning stages of those were presented in June, and there's some discussion time tonight. We are actually going to have a presentation. I'll go through a lot more detail, but
But North has never even come up at all?
Council Rock High School North?
Yes.
No, not in the proposals, no.
So then, the money that's an issue, that's why Wrightstown would be closed, because of money. So now you're going to build a stadium in South, a pool in South.
No stadium at South, sir.
No?
One of the groups, in their discussion, someone expressed an opinion that they thought it would be good to have a stadium and a pool.
It would have been good. It probably should have been done when it was built.
And it might be good. The question that comes before the board is, what of this menu of things to do will the board elect to do? I don't know. I can't speak for anybody else.
I'm just thinking like one step ahead. I just feel like that's next,
That
correct?
wasn't the higher end order for me to build a stadium or the pool. That's not on the high order for me alone.
Oh, me, I don't care. Like I said, I plan on my kids going to North. But that's got to be something that people have thought about, I'm sure. No? Just me. Okay. Mrs. Daniels is correct, though. It will destroy Wrightstown. Correct? And I've already gotten my taxes lowered when I first moved in. So as soon as Wrightstown gets closed, I will go back to Doylestown and get my mills and taxes changed, as will every other resident of Wrightstown. Won't that affect the bottom line for revenue? No? No, I think it's a mistake to close Wrightstown.
Hi, my name is Kadlem. I was a member of one of the committees that
made one of the recommendations. And so I felt obligated that I need to come in and reassure the Wrightstown community. I live in Holland. I have 2 kids, one in Council Rock South, and the one will be going to Holland Middle School. And we are part of the community, and we had representation from almost all communities in our committee. And we fought very hard. We thought very hard, and we had every single argument that you have presented today talked about, every single one of them. And one of our main objectives was to make sure that these schools are rid of their trailers. And in order to do that, the expense was significant. And we felt that the quality of education in some of these schools based on these trailers was simply not acceptable. That was one of the main complaints that we heard from some of the community members of our committee. So I also urge you, I think most of the speakers I heard today have only looked at one recommendation and not the number 2 or number 3. And as far as I remember, my committee did not recommend splitting the Wrightstown kids into separate schools. We recommended that all of them be transitioned to the same school, which was Newtown Elementary. And so, as one of I believe we submitted our document, and it should be in the number 2 as the number 2 proposal. I think you should look into it. And as the committee members have said, this is just a proposal, and it's not final. There's obviously more input to be said, and it was done in good faith as far as we were concerned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Igval. I live in Newtown, Pennsylvania, obviously. And I just have a short comment, more of a question. I'll be looking, and perhaps we'll get this feedback later on when you give an overview. When I reviewed the 3 proposals, at the front, there were certain requirements that needed to be met when these committees were put together in terms of what specific objectives they needed to address, and what the recommendations needed to include. So I'd be looking for feedback regarding specifically the 3rd proposal, or set of recommendations, I should say, which did not seem to meet the basic requirements that the board set for that committee. Specifically, there wasn't a specific timeline included, and there was not specific costs or numbers associated with each of the recommendations. And so to follow that, assuming that my understanding is correct, my question would also be, does that mean that that 3rd set of, that 3rd proposal needs to be eliminated from consideration, or does more time need to be spent in reassessing it and making sure that it aligned with the requirements that were set out up front? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Steve Polk, and I live in Holland. My kids go to Rolling Hills. And I want to first thank the 2 gentlemen that were part of the committees that came forward, because I know it's a tough thing to come in front and know that pretty much almost everybody is against you. But my ask is, I know you may not be able to provide the names of the committees, the people that were in the committees, because they may not be willing to put themselves out there and feel attacked. So my ask is to ask them if they would be willing to come forward, not today, but to put their names out there, because I think there's a lot of things that were gone over in those committees that a lot of people just don't understand what was discussed. And like the one gentleman said, almost every argument was probably brought up in those committees, and they still came to these conclusions. So I think it would be helpful if anyone that has an objection to something that was mentioned in one of those recommendations, that they can have some conversations with those people that were parents that are in these schools today that still made those hard recommendations. So that's just a request, and if you can do it, that's great. If you can't, I understand.
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. I'm with Mike tonight because this is deja vu for me.
28 years ago, I fell in love with the school. As soon as I walked in, the way the kids acted to one another, the teachers to the kids, the janitor knew everybody's name. It was this building. In 1986, I registered my kindergartner to this building. I love this school. It's the only school that Newtown Borough had. Almost every borough parent walked with their kid to school. We would linger outside, get to know one another, get to know our children's friends. Parents volunteered in the lunchroom. They volunteered in what was a computer room. It's laughable now. And I was the computer mom for kindergarten. This was a wonderful, wonderful place. And then they started to talk about closing it. And this community rallied around together the same way that you did. I walked around this building 100 times trying to figure out how it could be a K-6. It just couldn't be done. Even with a new renovation, we had gym in a basement with pillars in it, with hoses wrapped around that Mr. Fritz had gotten when he was a phys ed teacher here. They were here for like 35 years. Their lunchroom was underneath this room, and they had, every time they moved chairs in and out, it would squeak on the concrete floor. It was flawed. We did not see those flaws because we loved this school. As a computer mom, I knew how, when I blew the circuit to go down myself, I know I shouldn't have, and reset the thing so that we'd have power again. I'm still sad thinking about it. But at the time, this district needed a second high school. And it was very needy in the southern part of the district. There was a lot of houses being built. So it had to build Marine Welsh, and we had to build South. A lot of money, and North needed renovation. And this was only, by the time it was closed, it was a K1 and 2. But originally it was a K to 4, and I'm sorry, K to 3, and 4th and 5th were up at Goodnow in 10 classrooms. So what the district did was build 30 classrooms onto Goodnow, which is still the biggest school in the district. And when my third grader had to go up there in October because it wasn't ready, I was hesitant. And then I saw how that too would have the same teachers and a wonderful school, and we had like the best computers in the district. We had carpet on the floor. It was like an amazing place. It still had the same caring principal and vice principal because we were a big school. And we celebrated this school before it closed. And you look around, you'll see quilts that the kids made. This school was built in the 1800s, and it was a high school till 1954, and we had 4 generations of families who went to this school. And the kids took, they interviewed them, and they interviewed, people who were great-grandparents who went to the school, and they put out booklets. And the one thing I'm coming away with is how much you love your school, and I understand that. And the other thing I'm coming away with is there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I would hope that somebody in the school board and somebody in administration, when they hear someone come to the mic and say a fact that's not quite correct, or that they have a question, or they want to know why, or they want to know more about the finances, that you'll find a way to easily get it out to them. So if we're writing to the capital planning at crsd.org, let's not let that go into a vacuum. Let that be a public page with answers. You have a hard decision to make. I was on the planning committee. It was very difficult, and it's going to be even harder for the board. But at least have people have the right facts no matter which way they are on the fence. Thank you.
My name is George Moriarty. I was part of the planning committee, and I did not intend to speak today for a few reasons. The first was I felt that the folks from Wrightstown and other places, this was their forum. not ours to come up but here and defend our work. The second was because I'm kind of dressed for a day at the beach. That said, the gentleman from Holland made a great point, and I'm proud of the work we all put in from September on. I am not going to say we got it all right. I will share with you, I lost a bunch of arguments that I wanted to win, but I do stand behind the proposal I made with Mr. Downs, and that it's a proposal, and I welcome all your input because we did our best to consider everything we could, but you folks here have raised a bunch of issues that, being a small group, we didn't think of, so thank you for that. And I do think that the board's making an effort to communicate, and I hope we can keep this community discussion going. Thanks.
Steve McGill, also Holland, prior to that, Newtown, Chicago, a couple other places. When I was growing up, I was in an expanding area. I went to 7 different schools between kindergarten and high school graduation. I spent the bulk of my career with one company, managing people and developing people. And one of the things that I learned is that change is the one constant you have to deal with. When I moved here from Pittsburgh in 1983, I went to a meeting where it was said that the building of Newtown Grant, several thousand housing units, would have no effect on the enrollment of the district. And like Nancy, my daughter went to school here. I was the first president of the PTA when it was reconfigured from a afternoon tea to a meeting that a lot of parents could go to in the evening. So, you know, I have some history here too, but I don't let the history hold me back. And I think of school as a concept, as an exercise, as a part of my life. I don't think of it as a building. I've gone to schools that were ancient. I've gone to schools that were brand new. I was more interested in the teachers and the content. And the most important thing was my parents. And I think that's what you have to keep in mind. You are the most important part of your child's education. So, yeah, we can discuss all the buildings, and you know, I can tell Doug Taylor he should be making the schools out of glulam lumber rather than steel and concrete because it has a better carbon footprint. And he'll say, yeah, find me somebody who can design that and build it at a reasonable cost, and I'll consider it. We had that argument. It didn't make the recommendations. There are people who ask for pools and stadiums and all kinds of things. And yet, you know, I look out there in the community and I see people who are still hurting from the economy. And to me, those are things that they're wants, not needs, and we have to address those first. So I agree with the gentleman before me. We didn't get it all right. We can't get it all right. But there is an email on the website for you to be a participant in this. You have to be active. You have to stand up and make your thoughts known. And you can't just glance at these documents. Okay, we spent 6-7 months putting this stuff together with a lot of help from the staff and the board members in support. And a lot of times reading, arguing, discussing, considering other options, okay? So you can't just glance at it and think you understand it and you think you see everything that's in there. And if you think there's things that should be in there that aren't in there, put them in, you know? I disagreed with some stuff. I made my own recommendations, all right? And I sent them to the board. There is an email on the website where you can send your recommendations to all the board members. All the district staff, administrators have email addresses. They are glad to hear this stuff, all right? And every once in a while, there's a nugget in there that's going to either save us money or enhance education. So, you know, it's up to you as much as anybody who's on this committee. I'm Steve McGill. I'm in Holland. You can reach out and find me in the phone book. I'm glad to talk to you, okay? And I was on the committee. Thanks.
Good evening, Marilyn Scarpa, Newtown Township. I too was on the committee. I'm a Wrightstown parent. I love that school. I did pennies for playground. I did Bucks Beautiful. I did the new signs. I was so involved with that school. But I was on that committee and I decided also that Wrightstown needs to close. It was not an easy decision, but financially and for this district to move forward, we need to close some buildings We need to use our buildings more efficiently. And not for one moment do I think that your kids will not thrive at another school. You need to realize that. I wasn't going to speak tonight because I knew I would have daggers thrown at me and I would put myself out there. A lot of my friends are here. A lot of my neighbors are here. But I stand behind the decisions. We worked hard. We knew that there was a need for this district. We had to make some hard decisions, and the board now will have to make those decisions that will be difficult. They might not take all of them. They might do something that you don't necessarily agree with, but you need to know the facts and not just run on emotion. There were a lot of things said here tonight that are not true, that are misconstrued. I'm willing to talk to anybody now. I'm out here now. I served on the redistricting committee years ago too. I couldn't go to the grocery store without people accosting me. But everybody did okay. I need you to know that we did not make these decisions easily, but there is a need for this district to move forward. And they're educationally sound, these decisions, they're financially sound, and the district will be better off for it. Thank you.
Ed Farling from Holland. I also participated in the committee, part of the group 3 that was referenced earlier tonight, actually. For the first 15 years I lived in Northampton, I was taking one of my 3 kids over to Rolling Hills, and it was not easy for me to make the recommendation, to support the recommendation to close that school. In the group, we had a lot of discussion back and forth, some of it emotional, some of it very fact and financial based, but we were always civil together. And you know, all of you here tonight, you know, on a very emotional to you, very personal subject, I can tell from what you said, you have all remained very civil and almost pleasant, and you know that's to be commended. And I just wanted to introduce myself to you and say that I'm here. I'll talk to anybody and defend any of the recommendations we made, or at least explain them. Anything you want to hear about it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alex Brizuela. I am in Richboro now. I lived in Holland for 10 years. I have 3 kids in Richboro Elementary. Myself, me and my wife, we are actually not from this area, so I don't have the background and the attachment that some of these folks have at these schools. We are out of state. We did choose this area, Northampton specifically, for the school district. And then when we moved from Holland to Richboro, again, that move was due to the schools. The middle school and also Council Rock South, which looks like now that could be taken away from us. I can live with that. I also agree with all the gentlemen that, I went to school in the Bronx and in Queens. Any of these schools are fantastic, okay? No doubt. But for me, the issue that I have is I wish that the schools, for example, Richboro Elementary, take all the kids, move them together, all of them, wherever they're going to go. What I don't like is splitting them up, maybe 1/10 of them going to another school, 90% going to a different school. And if you have to split them up, do it 50-50. Let's not take, in my neighborhood, which is just a handful of families, and they're going to be pushed away, going the different path to the different middle school, to the different high school, than 95% of their friends. So I implore you that if you are going to do that, keep it 50-50, or at least keep the schools together. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Kevin Campbell. I was on the planning committee, and one of the recommendations, I believe it became recommendation number 2. Just for everyone's own edification, probably the first 30 days or first month of meetings, we struggled not much differently than you're struggling today, because we're all parents. We all have that passion around where our kids go to school, but we also have the charge that change is inevitable. We can't continue down that road. We've sacrificed some things, some little things for some bigger things that are bigger picture things that we may not today be seeing or embracing because the change is so near and dear to our heart. But eventually, if it's not today, it's going to be somewhere down the road. The district has got to progress and has to look at their schools. The foundations in some of these schools are crumbling. So I appreciate the people that came out and are in support of a new school, because that might be the right thing to do at a premium, at a cost. But we have to do other things before that. So, and the board, remember, these are recommendations, and we struggled with each and every one of them. I would hate to be sitting in your shoes for the next few months, but there's going to be a decision, and if we all can come together and we can and discuss them and unify, there might be just one silver lining that maybe we didn't think of, but I'm pretty sure we did, because we took it from your perspective and we charged the board. It's going to be difficult, but change is not always easy. So if we open our minds to it, we can get through it. It's not the end of the world, although it seems so today. The economy's changing. This school district has to change with it. Everybody's family has changed probably significantly over the last few years. We have to look at it with open eyes. I'm here to talk to anyone. I just want you to know that the recommendations from each and one of our members was not easy. And we really do feel your pain that you're going through or will be going through when the decisions come, and we hope to have encompassed each and everyone's concern. So I appreciate you guys coming out tonight. I would love to see the room filled for every board meeting going further. It shows involvement not just in the immediate need, but in the future. And I'm proud to be on the committee. I thank the board for allowing me to serve on the committee. Doug Taylor and I have become very good friends, and I'll be part of some other committees just because I got involved. So this is your school district. Get involved not only with this, with other things. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there. So again, read the information, use the tools available so we can get the information accurate out there. Thank you.
Hello. Excuse me. My name is Jennifer Giannini. My husband, Bill, spoke first in 3 minutes exactly. And we were discussing our concerns with, I know everybody keeps saying how change is a part of life, change is a part of life, this is what happens, and you know what, I agree with that. Change is a part of life. I want my children to know that their life isn't always going to be the same. There's going to be changes. There's going to be changes that they have to adapt to. There's going to be positives, there's going to be negatives, and they have to roll with it. And I want my kids to learn that, because let's face it, that's life. My kids go to Rolling Hills. I have one going into first grade and a 4-year-old that will be there eventually, hopefully. As much as I love Rolling Hills, I absolutely love it there. I too am in favor of small settings for education. I think my kids personally thrive better in smaller environments. I love that about Rolling Hills. I hope that my kids get to go there till 6th grade, till after 6th grade. However, if Rolling Hills does close, I feel my children can adapt. I feel they will be okay. What I don't like about the plan that I saw is our one neighborhood, just our neighborhood, will be separated from the rest of Rolling Hills. So I can deal with the change that's going to occur, but please, for you, how much change can a child take? These kids, they're young, they're growing, they're impressionable. This is feeling safe and having friendly faces and familiar faces and people that they know. If you're going to make them have this change, at least make the transition be easy and keep them with their friends, keep them with their peers. Why should our neighborhood be the only one separated from the rest of Rolling Hills? When I bought my house, honestly, I was surprised that I was Rolling Hills. But now I'm in Rolling Hills Elementary. That's where my kid's going. I'd like to stay there. If not, please just keep my children with their peers. Let them go on to Hillcrest. Let them go on to Holland Elementary. Let them go on to South. That's where I feel I should be. Again, it's in my backyard. We watch the kids outside playing field hockey and hear the marching band when I'm outside with my kids. Like, that's what I love about where I moved. So it's not change that I'm opposing. It's just look at the change that the redistricting, look at the map. It wasn't, I believe that was a little flawed. But I would love for Rolling Hills to stay open. That would be a dream, but I know that that might not be in the plans. And I know that you have to do what's best for the district as a whole. So, all right, thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paul DeRusso. I live in Newtown. I just wanted to offer a few observations. I'm new to the area. Just moved here about 10 months ago from Dallas. Don't hold that against me. I actually grew up in Boston, and also don't hold that against me. But anyway, I just wanted to offer an observation. It seems as if the way in which the communications came out is a bit flawed. So I would have to ask the committee to really seriously reconsider, are you in a position to make a decision? Are you really? I get more emails from Mr. Klein, thank you for the notices on snow days and all sorts of other things going on. This, I found out happenstance in my neighborhood. Do I read my email? Yes. I'm in the software industry. I read my email every day. I'm on my iPhone every other minute. Don't have my wife comment on that. But I just want to offer another perspective too. Have you really thought of everything? When I first went to, my daughter goes to Wrightstown, and one thing I will admit to you that I was surprised by was the age of the computer lab. I mean, come on. Some of those machines are something I used back in college, and that was quite some time ago. So I just ask you, have you thought of all options, like sponsorships in the school? If the goal is to really save money and to help each of these buildings operate more effectively, which costs money, have you considered sponsorships? Trust me, I call on big organizations like Barnes & Noble, Microsoft, and others. They're dying to get to districts, especially like ours, that are so well known and the students are so good, they'd love to be in front of them every day. Why not consider that as an offset to the cost to run these schools, as opposed to shut them down? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, we are...
Jane Magny, Wrightstown Township. I really want to thank the committee for all the tremendous work and time they put into doing the proposals. I know that that's always lots and lots of work, but I think there's something that you may have missed. Closing Wrightstown Elementary would be tearing the heart out of Wrightstown. This is, you've heard from the parents, but let me tell you about the people that live there, the long-term people. We have people don't leave Wrightstown. They stay there 50, 60 years. And I've been talking to some of them recently. And they, as they say to me, this is where they've met these longtime friends. They met them at the school with their children. I was speaking to 3 women this morning and they said, you know, remember when our son met? I allowed him to come over to your house to play only because I had seen you before at the school, and I thought, you were a pretty good woman. They're still very close friends, 60 years later. Or a lady I picked up to take to the farmer's market the other day. She lives in Pickering Manor. She moved there about a year ago. She lived in Wrightstown for 60 years. And the conversation at the farmer's market was, do you hear what the possibility is of closing Wrightstown Elementary? This woman was aghast. I mean, she just could not believe that possibility even existed. And that's really the sense of the community, because this is really the only place people get to know one another. We don't have all of these other facilities. But what we have done, and to the benefit of the school district, is we were the first, well, there were 2 of us, municipalities to have an open space referendum. Our first one was in 1995. We've been purchasing development rights, even some land, to try to keep the number of students down, to help out the school district. You know, the more students you have, the more expensive it's going to be. What I'm saying is, Wrightstown is very different than the other municipalities here. And I think that this is what really was not seen in these proposals. And I think that's part of the discussion that we need to have before the decision is made to close that school. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for public comment. We are going to move on to the discussion portion of recommendations. So in an effort to facilitate our discussion as a board about this, what I asked was for Doug to prepare a summary of how we got to this point. There have been, although I didn't know there would be these, there have been many comments tonight about our communications, which we started out over a year ago, I want to say 2 years ago, communicating. However, I'm not trying to disparage that to the people who said that they didn't see it. I'm just saying we did put it there, and so we have to rethink if people read it or does it need to be highlighted or et cetera. But I asked Mr. Taylor to put together kind of a summary. How do we get to this point? And then I want to open it up for board discussion. My thought was that the board discussion would go into what are going to be our next steps? Where do we want to move from here? What's the process so we can let the community know what the process will be? Just for those community members, it was not our intention to be, oh, we're going to vote on option A. You know, we are just in the beginning of this process. We've just had the presentations made. So I'm going to turn it over to I just made you a doctor, to Doug, Mr. Taylor, to give a brief synopsis of how we got to this point. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you for your interest in these discussions and your passion for what the district is doing and considering. I appreciate it. I value that. I share the same passion that you do and what I do. So I want to give you an overview of where we started and where we are today. Around July of 2010, when Mr. Reinhardt arrived at the district, we started with financial planning, the maintenance of the annual debt service, and financing capital needs. And there's certainly a lot more that goes into that than just that activity shows, as do most of these. These are just little snippets of things that we've done moving from that point. So in 2010 to today, Mr. Reinhardt's been working on those things along with some other folks. Preparation of the capital improvements plan. There's a condition survey, reporting, and prioritization that I personally prepared when I came to the district in June of 11. And that was a process of going through every school, taking a look at the conditions, putting together the estimated cost for each one of those items, the implementation of, prioritization, and how we manage summer projects, but also in a bigger picture, how we manage larger facility improvement projects. So it's our tool that we use, and it's an active, dynamic document. So it was prepared, presented in December of 12. It was updated in December of 13, and it will be updated again this December. Every year that document will be updated based on the needs of the district. There was a Pennsylvania Economic Lead Pell study, the demographics, the growth patterns, the projections, which is more of it's a stagnant document compared to the decision insight document, which we'll talk about in a moment. That document's prepared. Once it's prepared, it's a hard copy. It no longer, until you have that process done again, it is not updated. That was actually delivered in February of 13, and again, another tool utilized as a part of this process. And the tools that I'm mentioning were ultimately used by the teams that presented those three options to the district. So it's important for you to recognize that all this information that we've collected was shared with those committees so they could use that information to make their sound decisions. Around April of 13, the Schrader Group, architectural firm who's worked with the district on several projects, prepared a capacity analysis study. So with them, by their side, we visited every elementary school, every middle school, the high schools, and we took a look at how the buildings are being utilized and how we could optimize the use of those buildings. There were documents prepared, plans prepared, coded drawings, in an effort to show where we have over or underutilized space in these schools. And if we took modulars offline, how we would facilitate those students. And I know Nancy would agree we want to get rid of modulars. So that is certainly part of our plan. Decision insight, projection, report, and software. That's the document that is a dynamic demographics growth patterns and projections tool. That is updated yearly. That is an actual document that will report on new developments and other growth and removal of potential facilities throughout the district to use in studying the projections, as well as a tool that provides you with the ability to move the boundaries to kind of see where, if you were to move a boundary, how it affects the sending to respective schools. So that's a tool that was used by the committees as well. The Board of School Directors' decision to form a community-based Council Rock Planning Committee to seek the volunteers and form the committees that presented these fine options to the district, that was discussed in the summer of 13, and that group, or the large group, was established in November of 13, before ultimately breaking down into 3 kind of subcommittees to provide these reports. The initial meeting of the Council Rock Planning Committee took place on November 14th of 2013, and there was board presence as well as administrators to greet that group and talk about what the mission of the group was, what the goals were, and how we would move forward. And again, more of an independent process by that large group to prepare these recommendations with feedback from administration as required as they prepared those plans. In January of 14, and prior to that, by a month or so, we met with some staff at Newtown Middle School, and we talked about programming and how that building would be best utilized if we addressed all the programmatic issues of that facility. And a presentation of the Newtown Middle School feasibility study was presented in January of 14. The Council Rock Planning Committee had work sessions, public meetings, information gathering, and preparation of the recommendations from the November 2013 inception up to June of 14, which was last month when they presented those recommendations. And you can see on June the 18th, at the board meeting, those 3 committees presented the recommendations, teams 1, 2, and 3, which are posted to the Council Rock website that you could see that information. And tonight, of course, the Board of School Directors initiates the review of the Planning Committee's recommendations and master planning considerations. So yes, there's a lot of information that was prepared, a lot of information that was used as a tool to help those committees and guide them to where we are. And it's very early stage of the board hearing that information and now determining how to best move forward with that plan. So while you've heard a lot of things, and you've heard about pools, and you've heard about stadiums, and you've heard about schools closing, there are no decisions yet, and tonight is the start of that process. So it's great that you're here. It's great that you're providing your feedback early, and that is an update of the process to date. Any questions?
I don't think so.
Oh,
Okay,
the committee
so
So I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You want me to answer that?
I didn't hear a question.
The question was asked how often the committees met. And there were monthly public meetings of the committee. They were advertised meetings. And those committees met here at the boardroom each month from December through November through April, May. Even June?
Right up till June.
Right up to June.
We canceled the June meeting, but we read right up through the May meeting.
And then those committees also had their own kind of subcommittee meetings where they branched out and they had meetings either here in the rooms or they met off-site at Starbucks or wherever they chose to have their meetings. But they had many, many meetings aside from those public meetings.
Okay, so I want to open it up for board discussion on next steps, how you see moving forward. I have my own opinions, but just because I have the mic, I'm not going to start with mine. Anybody?
I'll start.
Yes,
actually,
Mr.
what a
Groff.
surprise. I want to
Shocking.
talk to some of the, Nancy made an observation. She said there were a number of things that were said that maybe will need to be corrected. The public comment was an hour and 15 minutes, so I have some points I want to make from that and then some other things. One, the observation was made that at the small school, the principal knows everyone. Let me give you some insight. Mark was the principal at Goodnoe and was later the principal at Holland Elementary. Was Goodnoe?
Newtown.
Newtown, sorry. And then later Holland Elementary. He related to me this year at high school graduation, particularly at South, that this is the last year that he will have known all of these students as having been their principal at some point. When you see how Mark interacts, you realize that that's actually the expected norm in the district, that the principal will know the students by first name, often their family, and most frequently their older and younger siblings. So I hear the observation. I don't need to think that only happens at Wrightstown. I think that is the norm within the district. There was discussion about teacher turnover within larger schools. Council Rock does not suffer from teacher turnover at any of the schools. Once a teacher's in this district, they tend to stay. We have teachers who've retired from this district with 42 years. When you look at our struggles around our contracts with teachers, the struggle, part of it is that teachers, once they're here, they stay forever. They're good teachers, but they don't leave, so we don't suffer like that issue. There was a number of times, and I apologize, that when people say that they chose the child's school, their children's school, this district has struggled frequently, not so much in recent years when we built the second high school, but before that, we struggled with two words, and that was equity and parity, and trying to establish a consistency between schools. And that's still a topic. Somebody said in conversation that Wrightstown taxes were high. And I think they meant to say, and I will take it that they meant to say, compared to surrounding communities, but all of the taxes within Council Rock, the Council Rock portion of the taxes, are the same. So it's not that Wrightstown taxes are higher than somewhere else within Council Rock. And what we're talking about today is where within Council Rock, where with Council Rock teachers, students will go. We've also said, it was also said, you know, someone uses the term "will be going." I think just so we're very clear, and it's been said time and again, nothing that was presented is a fait accompli. Nothing that has been presented has been accepted or voted or approved by the board. These were citizens. In 2002, with the opening of South, this board sat and heard a great deal of dissension about splitting the 10th grade. These are 10th graders who had known each other forever, and to send them to some to north and some to south, it would mean the end of them. It didn't. And I point to that simply to say that, and I don't want to overburden it and say children are resilient, but when people try to make the decisions that are the most appropriate for the district as a whole, and considering of the children as well, oftentimes there's a middle ground, and most people accommodate that. Someone had mentioned that the third proposal at my term was not fully formed. These are not professional consultants that are going to then will agree to one of the proposals, and that proposal will be enacted in its entirety. There will be features of each of the proposals that this board will agree with or disagree with, and part of the reason to have three proposals come forward was to allow lesser voices to be heard, and also to look for commonality. When you had three work streams working independently, what common themes came forward? Because certainly when you have a common theme among three independent committees, it's going to lend some understanding, some credibility, and some concept to it. Sorry for my notes. I have to tell you one thing, and I hope we will reflect upon this. One, Ed Farling spoke before, and he said, you know, that everybody has been respectful, and I'm very impressed with that. What I know, because I've sat here and I've watched the people who came to the mic, and I know the people, Washington could take a lesson from what happened on this committee. And the lesson that Washington could take was the people you saw here today who stood up and proudly said, I was a member of the committee, and I did this and such and the other, are people who have opposed each other at political polls for years. They have sat and worked for different candidates standing next to each other. But they came together and put that aside. And what they spoke to was how to allow this district to continue to be as good as it has been or to get better. And how do we do that? I don't want to say it's a lifeboat where things have to be decided who goes overboard and who doesn't. But the challenge to this board is going to be how do we make this district preserved and continue to grow and prosper? And there will be difficult decisions. I'll relate to you this, that I had visited Pittsburgh this past weekend or the weekend before to visit my father, who's 92, and he took me around, scary to ride in the car with him, but he took me around to show me the buildings that were all being rebuilt and that had been closed at some point in the school district, and then reopened and repurposed and changed. And I was amazed that my youth was going away because they were tearing down the building. It was brand new when I was there. How could they possibly tear it down? But they are. And I was amazed. And then he said to me, but Jerry, this is the third time they've done it since you left. And they have. And when you look at it, they've changed. They closed middle schools. They opened middle schools. They reformed the high school. Steve McGill said before, other people have quoted him as well, saying, the only thing constant is change. It's our goal, obviously, to make that as minimal as possible and to reduce that as much as possible. But the one thing I don't want to see change, and I will say this and think that I speak for the board, is the one thing that I don't want to see change is I don't want to see Council Rock get into a position where it can't continue to offer the quality of education that it has always been known for, and that so many of you spoke tonight eloquently about you bought into the Council Rock district because you wanted the education of Council Rock. Sure, you may have bought and said, I wanted to be Wrightstown, or I wanted to be Richboro, but overall, as a board, we manage that delivery of services for 11,500 students and want to make it as best we can. Again, go back to that issue of equity and parity, which is we need to be able to create schools where one group of children, Rick and I got involved with the board back in 1998. 1998, when we joined for the class size committee, and we were trying to figure out how big class sizes should be. And it is, once you're on this side of the fence, you realize class sizes vary in this district. There are classes in this district that are 30 students, maybe a little more. There are some schools in this district, because of their size, that are 17 students in a class, just because of the way it broke. Part of it is, how do we justify to the parents whose children are in 30 children schools, 30 children classes, that if they just lived a few blocks away and paid the same taxes, their children would be in a class of 17. I don't expect you to answer the question. It's a little rhetorical, but those are the challenges, in part, that this board is going to have to face and come to a conclusion with. So I apologize for running on. I appreciate that you all came to speak. I think you made a number of good points. I wanted to speak to the guy about sponsorship. We've tried. I'm glad to try it again. But the last time we got a good sponsorship, it was $500,000. We were selling Coca-Cola. It didn't go as we expected. We got the money, but it bound us for years. And now we look back on it and say, why were we selling sugared soft drinks in our schools? Well, I'm glad to try it. I'm glad to explore it. But I don't think that adding sponsorships onto our model is going to be the systemic change that is really going to come about within our model. So for me, when we look at the many choices that are here, I said to Doug before, he's prepared a spreadsheet that documents what the choices are. I'm looking for the commonalities, because from my perspective, when I look at what the commonalities are within all the proposals, if they came from 3 separate groups, I'd like to look at those and qualify them, not for timing, but just for, is it something that the board conceptually agrees with, and get Stephen Covey in 7 Habits of Highly Successful People says, you deal with the big rocks first. Big rocks go in first. Those 3, I think, are the big rock. Those suggestions that are coming from all 3 are the big rocks.
So I'll say I was going to agree with that. What I'd like to see happen next is take the commonalities and have the administration review them and give us some feedback, because they're the ones that are going to implement them, and they haven't really weighed in since they were done by the community. But I was thinking commonalities, the same thing.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, and I think the addition to that would be helpful for us is to really understand the financial implications. Over time, we had some groups that did that to a great level of detail, but to be able to look at revenue projections, to look at costs, so we can really understand the impact of the changes we're making, make good choices, the impact of taxes would be really helpful. So to lay out these commonalities in a time frame from people who have been operating the district for a long time would be helpful. But the finance piece, especially for me, would be helpful as we make the choices.
Bill?
Yeah, I agree the commonalities are a great place to start. And I think some of the commonalities are considering a 2 middle school system, which has the advantage of balancing the flow of children to north and south, which right now is not balanced. One of the commonalities is the idea of closing a school or a couple of elementary schools. And I have to say I had a lot of passion for the idea of the cost of schools going into this process. But I want to modify that a little bit. It was interesting when I was looking at Central Bucks to find that their schools are on average all bigger than ours. Their biggest schools are bigger than our biggest. Their smallest schools are bigger than our smallest schools. Their district, on average, is about $40 million a year cheaper if it were our size. Some of that is teacher pay, some of that is the way we do our special education, but some of that is school size. And I really learned from the committees, there's so many aspects to that. There's, one cafeteria, one gymnasium. There's a lot of shared things that go into a school that when it's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit cheaper. But there's even more than that. When a school's really small, you have a music teacher that may have to travel back and forth. There's also just the fact that you have a fixed sending boundary from year to year to year, and as you have random fluctuations in children getting older or families having children, it's harder in that smaller group to match the number of classrooms you have. So we, as a school district, never want to have too many children in a room. So what that means is you have to go towards the low side on average. So I had a lot of energy for the costs, but just forget the costs. The fact is our enrollment is going down, and the Schrader report that was based came out about a year ago, or it was based on numbers from a year ago. Since then, we're down 62 children, but that's been going on for a long time. And if you look at our current enrollment numbers, the number of children that are in 7 to 12 versus 1 to 6, there's about 375 fewer in grades 1 through 6 as 7 to 12. But that's been going on for years. So that's just the current snapshot, but there were hundreds of children before that. So aside from the money, what do we do with schools that don't have enough children in them? I mean, can we continue to run them? Does it make any sense? And that's one commonality. So I agree, starting with the commonalities is the way to go. And it would be nice to have the administration's view on if we were to close schools, when is it feasible to do that? Is one item of interest. So,
if I could just tag on to that, Bill, a number of the communications that I have received over the past several days had to do with growing concerns within the community that we would be closing potentially at least an elementary school this school year. And I think if we could, at the very least, just allay those fears that there's no schools that will be closing for this school year. So while we have to address all of this, and we have to talk about it, and we have to do so quickly and as transparently as possible, this September is not in jeopardy.
I wanted to add to that there's been no timeline because there's been no vote. So a timeline presumes that they made proposals for timelines, but until we make a decision on an action, at the time we decide on the action, we will.
Earliest time that Wrightstown Elementary School closes?
Sir, I don't have, just to be clear, there is no answer. 3 people by public committee made recommendations. In those recommendations, they made timelines. And I'm going to be Jerry Grupp for a minute and presume to speak a little bit for the board, but you guys disagree with me if you want, in that the general idea here, and the most painful thing that I heard was the lack of communication personally, because we have been for 2 years. Please join the committee. Every person who put their name on for the committee, originally we were going to pick, we said no, we don't want to cut anybody else. Every person who joined for the committee could be on it if they want. Some people couldn't keep up with the committee and dropped off, but it is our goal. Tonight is an open discussion of what will be the next steps. We hope what we can say to you is we think this is going to be the next step, or the next 2 steps, or the next 3 steps. But every person on this board that I've individually spoken to has said, I presume we'll have a couple conversations. They'll involve a couple things. Then we'll put out to the community, and we'll have a meeting at one of the high schools or one of the middle schools, and we'll listen to the community again. But at that point, we will hopefully be saying, this is the way the board's leaning, this is what we think, this is our timeline. Okay, come back and talk to us again. And then we will say, there's going to be a vote at the board meeting, and each one of the 9 of us is going to have to stand up and vote thumbs up or thumbs down on an item or on a proposal. It's on us. So it's not, I appreciate those committee members who stood up. Good job. I respect you tremendously. But honestly, nothing has been voted on. I don't want to downplay what they recommended. Nothing has been made. There's been no timeline. We will continue to communicate through listserv. I feel confident we will do that. Perhaps we will look for other ways. We are glad you're communicating with other people. But I just want to tell you, it's been our goal to put it all out there. The reason I think there's misinformation is because we did put it all out there and then people panicked, rightfully, I'm not saying it's wrong, and thought it was going to happen right away, or it's already been decided, or we've decided in 2000X something's going to happen. We haven't made any decisions, and none of this happens without a vote of this board. So that's the process that's going to talk. I will allow questions again at the end. I need to allow some board comment because only a few of us have had a chance to speak, and all 9 of us like to talk. So I'm going to let board talk, and then we'll talk about if we can take some questions. I don't want to put you off, but I just want to make sure everybody on the board has a chance to speak. Maybe they answer your questions before you have them. Patty.
So this is not an event. The closing of a school is not an event. It's not a one-shot deal. You are now engaged in a process, as we have been involved in a process for the past year, maybe even a little longer. It's a process that is ongoing and a process that can take up to 6 or 7 years to complete. We spoke just recently with the architects and the
construction
managers who are talking to us about the renovation and or rebuilding decision not made of Newtown Junior High. I said, how fast can this get done? Because I'm the kind of person that likes it done yesterday, and I hate process. But they said, no. This takes 3 or 4 years. This is not going to happen. Nothing is happening tomorrow. This is an ongoing process. For me, we are a school district that has shrunk by 1,000 children over the past 10 years. And yet we run the same number of facilities. Common sense tells you that we are underutilizing those facilities today. And in doing so, we're wasting resources that are applied to the education of all of the children. We're doing that while we face increased pressure in terms of finances. We can deal with that only one way, by raising taxes. But the state has limited our ability to do that by putting a cap on those taxes. They've increased what we have to pay and limited what we can raise in revenue. And somewhere in there is a crunch. And that crunch is coming at us like a big truck. To continue providing for the schools the kinds of programming that we have had, the numbers and varieties of classes in the high schools, we have to find a way to cover that. Nobody likes the idea of closing a school. But we all have to do what we have to do. We have to be responsible with those resources that we have. There are so many parts to this. It's like 27 balls in the air, and until we get them in a good order, which is what we're trying to do, we just have to go through this process. But we have to begin. We will find the answers that we're looking for, and we have to start. When we first had the committee, and the committee people that are here can tell you, I was the least happy that we were having a committee. I didn't want a committee. I wanted us to study it, make a decision, move on. Because for me, pulling the Band-Aid off quickly is a lot better than yanking at it every couple days, which is what can happen. And I don't want that for you. I don't want that for myself. I thought I knew, and I wouldn't learn much from what these committee groups were going to say to me. In terms of Wrightstown, I frequently said, I would never close Wrightstown. It's the only school up there. Northampton has a whole bunch of schools. My school, the school that my children went to that I love and adore, is Rolling Hills. Rolling Hills has 3 pods. I loved pits and pods for my kids. I loved open classroom for my kids. It's not what education is today. And it's not really functional as it is the way it was then. It can be renovated. I offered Rolling Hills up, in my mind, as a school that would have to go. But as I listened to the committees, things became clearer to us about the numbers and how it's going to go forward. For me, one of the hardest things about Wrightstown, and it's something you could discuss with your supervisors, your township supervisors, is there's no sewers. No water, no sewers. You don't think about that, but that's an issue for that building, a very big issue. As we think about renovations to it or having it grow, it just, with that setup, it can't. So that makes that building have to be tiny and not cost-effective at all. I believe that we can get a good quality education in any school in this district. And while I don't want change for anybody, I see us entering a process now that is difficult. It's going to be difficult for everybody. One gentleman said, this is going to affect everybody. Yep. Over the next 7 years, there will not be a family in this district that is not touched by change. Some people will be touched more than once. But it's what's going to happen to keep Council Rock a high-performing, quality district that is affordable for everybody.
Somebody else want to take a turn? Mr. Abramson.
Before I make my comments, maybe I can lighten the mood a little. After hearing all the speakers and the comments from the audience and where you're from, I have a question for the audience. Is there anyone there that has not lived down south at one point? Educational excellence and high property values is, I'm sure, a major concern for you and for us. Human factors is also going to be a concern, and perhaps we haven't talked, you've talked about them.
No, we can hear you.
Is this microphone on?
Just move it closer.
Yeah, talk closer to it, I think. Sorry.
All right, the human factors
Better?
are issues that we have to discuss, I think, in much more detail. There's recommendations, there's cold, hard facts, there's numbers, but we have to look at the benefits that it's going to have, any decision is going to have on the community. With regard to this school, that Nancy talked about, based on human factors and lower class sizes in the community, I voted against the close of this school. I didn't want to close this building when it was Chancellor Elementary. When Jerry talked about the split of the class of 2003, based on human factors, I opposed the split of the high school class of 2003. And again, what we have facing us with closing of schools and redistricting, we have to take into consideration the human factors that are going to be involved. And my suggestion is that whatever decision we make, that we do discuss with the community, and the community lets us know how it's going to impact them. You already started to. But we try to reduce the detrimental impact that any decision will necessarily have on some or maybe many. And we just don't take, if it comes down to redistricting, cold hard facts of lines and numbers, but we try to keep communities together. With the closing of any school, if there is one, again, try to reduce the detrimental impact it will have on the community. I don't know how I'm going to go right now. I think there's some ideas that I do have I could share with you that I believe, yes, we have to build a new Newtown Middle School. Right now, yes, I think Wrightstown Elementary may have to be changed into another use for the school district. And maybe another middle school will go in the meantime. Again, all these decisions that are going around in my mind, I'm looking at the consequences of each decision, the possibilities that this will have. I look at, like Jerry mentioned, the parity issues, and I'm concerned about the cost of each and the tax consequences of each. And that's the great unknown, because we don't know what's going to happen with any tax reform in the future, because these are long-term goals. And so we don't have a crystal ball, but these are things that we do have to take into consideration. So again, I would hope that the community and the school board, in making any decision, will look at not just the recommendations, because they are what's on paper, they're there, but something that's underlying this whole school district. And again, to me, that's what makes us really a great school district, is also taking into consideration all the human factors that will go along with it.
Ms. Brooks?
I have a bunch of things to say, but the first thing that I think is really, really important to say is the board provided guidelines for the committees on what they had to work towards. Nowhere, anywhere, never did this board say close schools. The fact that all three committees came up with recommendations to close schools is because of information that they assessed. No one from the administration or the school board said, you are charged with telling us what schools to close, taking off trailers. No. We did say take off trailers.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that part we did. But I mean, if you look, and that document is available online, the instructions that were given to the committee were, look at the facts. And so, I like to think of it like, say it was me, okay? I live in a home in Richboro that's expensive to maintain. My taxes are high. The maintenance of my home is high. I have to make sure my heat and air work. I have to make sure the roof is sound. And now my children, sadly, grew up and are pursuing dreams outside of my house. If I was in a situation where I could not afford to maintain my home, I would be faced with a very serious decision. If I feared that I couldn't pay my taxes, if I feared that I couldn't, if I had my roof leaked and I couldn't stop it and couldn't pay for it, I'd have to make a decision, for me personally, will I downsize and live in a more affordable home? So that's basically what we're talking about. I'm looking at the home that exists for 11,000 plus students across 10 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 2 high schools, and an alternative school. The number of kids in our house is declining. Our enrollment has significantly dropped, and the demographic study says that it's going to continue to drop. So our house is much larger than the people who live in it. I also have to consider the state of our facilities. Some of our buildings are in tremendous need of work. The capital improvement plan that has been put together and prioritizes our needs say that our buildings have over $100 million of identified things that have to be addressed. Now, they're all prioritized, and so the most pressing things do get addressed as needed. We can't just say, okay, we're going to do $130 million worth of renovations and make all these buildings great. We have to pace it. The sequencing of it is important. We're also faced with pension increases that are only going to continue. We are also faced with potential declines in revenue. So when I look at the facts, I do think we need to downsize our house. We have to think about it. And in doing so, I also think that we have to look at the big picture. And for me, I want to prioritize saving money before we spend money. Meaning, a lot of buildings need renovations. And before we start building up nice buildings and big renovations or additions or whatever, we have to couple that with how do we balance that so that we are not just spending exorbitant amount of monies and not saving money. Because the goal of this is to manage this financially. Now, all this being said, a lot of this discussion is philosophical. One of the groups said that the ideal building size for an elementary school is 700 students. And if we could bulldoze the whole district and build 700 student schools in exactly the right places, all spaced out in the right place, that would be great. So while I accept that that's an efficient number, I have to couple that when I make a decision, which is the reality of where our schools are, where our students would go, and does that make sense? So simply saying that we need to look at this and have larger schools doesn't mean that we can actually make that happen with our existing buildings where our students live. These are all things that we need to address. So for the purposes of future discussion, I do agree that we should be looking at the commonalities first because that makes the most sense. But I would like to see us focus our discussions rather than talking about these are the 5 or whatever it is, I don't know how many commonalities there were. Rather than saying at our August meeting we're going to talk about the commonalities, I'd like to try to sort of specify it more and keep us targeted so that the public comment, the people who come to public comment are satisfied and that we can, as board members, focus better on what we're going to be discussing rather than trying to cover every topic. My suggestion would be that the very first thing we focus on is our middle school issues because we are faced with decisions to spend significant money that are being expected of us in one thing, whether associated with this or separate. So for me, I would like to see a very focused conversation on middle schools first. And it's not like we have to exhaust everything about that before we talk about anything else, but let's just sort of stagger it a little bit so that every topic gets its due diligence, not only for the satisfaction. I mean, there are people that came here tonight who I think you might have thought you were going to get certain answers to things, and sadly, you're probably going home feeling like you didn't get anywhere with that. But I mean, we appreciate what you said. The purpose of this is to start the conversation. But if we better target what we're going to talk about at each time, I think it would be more satisfying for the public and for me personally. If I'm going to do my homework and really research an issue, I'd rather focus it on one thing. But I do want to so that's my overall point, but I just want to say a couple of things. One person did make a comment that said that closing schools is the easy thing. No. If I have to vote to close a school, and I think I speak for everyone here, that is the hardest thing that we will ever have to do. Everybody at this table understands the emotion and the passion that we all have to our schools. This is not an easy decision at all. And so I do not want to allow that characterization to just be out there. I agree with Wendy. I am concerned that people felt like they didn't know. I mean, it's been in the newspaper, it's been on the patch, it's been on places, but we need to talk about that because
Well, to the point of middle schools, because I agree with you. I think starting with the middle schools, particularly because we have some other extended work, I guess I was thinking that if the commonalities, if we gave the administration maybe till the first meeting in September, I mean, I'll put it out there. One of my concerns is having this meeting in July and some people on vacation or, people spoke to not knowing. So I'd probably personally feel a little better about our next conversation being in September when I feel like people are back. I mean, I'm not trying to slow it down. Believe me, I've been
Well, I agree with that.
like
I don't
rushing
know
it,
that
but
we have to skip a meeting because there's so much emotion and momentum already, and there are going to be many, many, many more meetings. So we're quite a ways out from having to vote.
Well,
but that being said, I just want to conclude by saying that I have been involved I've been on the board for a short time, but I have been involved in Council Rock actively for nearly 2 decades. And I have always been supremely focused on what Rick referred to as the human factors. So I just want to assure the people here and in the community that that commitment has not changed. The difference for me is that there's a lot of other variables to now consider, but I will never lose sight of that human factor.
I think in fairness to the committee as well, we didn't charge them to assess that necessarily. That's for us to talk about in terms of what our thoughts are on those bigger, broader issues. I think the committee came back and gave us what we asked them to do, but I think that it's also very important. I've heard many people say, well, you said you're going to do this and you said you're going to do that, and we haven't said anything. We have asked, ironically, in an effort to be as transparent and inclusive and participatory as possible, which is why the committee was formed in the first place. I see now there's a perception that we have sort of done something in some fashion and not informed the community. To the point that Wendy and Denise made, and I do not say this critically in any way, shape, or form, I am baffled at the painstaking efforts we took to inform, and so we have to find a better way to do that or a different way to do that, because if that message was not heard by our community, something's not working. I don't think Mr. Klein or this board could have done anything more than we know to do to inform the community for all this time that this was happening. So any suggestions or ideas or thoughts that any of you have, we would certainly hope you would share them with us. There's an email address for all of the board members, as Wendy indicated. There's public comment again tonight. There is the email address designated solely for this issue. So maybe that's how we just make sure it's out there.
And we have board meetings twice a month, We have a facilities meeting once a month and a finance meeting once a month. And we have committed as a board. I'm sorry, an academic standards meeting. And we, as a board, have committed to meet together every Thursday night throughout the entire summer. So, not that we mind. We're very used to each other.
Let me also build on this, which is to say, I appreciate when people say that we didn't communicate appropriately. I just sent Mark and Matt a note. I have a domain address which we can use to dedicate to that, and I'll give you that domain address. But the challenge that this board has is it serves a wide disparity of people with varying interests in this community, in this district. We just went through tax assessment. We just determined what the taxes were going to be. In years past, this room would have been crowded. Just so you know, to give the people's expectations, there was a room set up across the way for overflow today. When I got up, when Jud was making his presentation, it was our representative in the room hosting nobody. So we set up, we thought there'd be a lot more people. When we go through taxes and tax setting for the millage for each year, there were times in the past when this room would have been filled up and that room. And now, it doesn't happen. I don't know why. This board hears from certain people who say certain things and not many others. So I tell you that from the perspective of it is hard to know what people are interested in and how what we're doing fits into the buckets that they want to be interested in. So I'll look at Mark and ask, but it only, and I ask about HAC, is there a capacity there? Well, I guess that's what the listserv, which is to sign up for listservs. The problem with HAC, the Home Access Center, or whatever that is it is predominantly for parents, and that people who don't have children in the schools won't really sign up for it. And so again, we'll get with all due respect, and I certainly understand and have compassion with what's going on, but there are two sides, because there's another section of people who say, the heck with the kids, it's money. And our job is to walk the middle and to find that middle ground. But if you've ever watched these, I think this board does a very good job of trying to represent both sides of most issues so that it gets a public fair hearing. How we communicate, I don't know. Unless we start putting up listserv topics that say, here's a listserv topics about tax, here's a listserv about redistricting, about busing, and then we wind up sending out listserv custom. I don't know how to
do we know if the Facebook page?
Guys. Yeah. Look, if it's something about closing schools, send a letter. Everyone still gets the mail. We get checks, bills in the mail. We need to see the mail. If there was a letter, it was sent out.
There, but again, sir, you need to stop yelling.
Can I please finish?
Certainly. But why don't you do that at public comment? My point is, we.
Not your time to talk.
He's right, though.
No,
Send a letter. This is a big issue. This is about closing our
It was not about closing schools. It was a capital planning committee. I take issue with it's about, these are the recommendations. The charge, the committee was formed, it was not about closing schools. But we
That was the result of it.
Talks about closing the school. Each one of you have already said that it is your concept or idea that it should be closed.
No, sir, I have not said that. I have not said that, sir.
The others have they not?
Point of order,
Okay.
Madam President. Let's.
Yeah, public comment will be at the end of the evening.
re-election in 2015. Keep that in mind. All right. Wow. This may seem like a small group of people.
What was that?
Is that how you're going to influence
Excuse me.
the board?
I'm going to ask for adjournment.
Okay.
We're going to adjourn for 5 minutes until.
All right, we're adjourned for 5 minutes. We're off for 5 minutes. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
What? Yeah, this is not a problem. Not for me.
I hear you on that.
appearing is that we're trying to understand how to do it. Because one person yells out, and then we start responding, and then we accelerate to bed. And that's why we take a 5-minute break. So I apologize if it's disrespectful, but if you've watched the meetings, we've argued with things about ourselves, but we try and not scream over each other or yell at each other. We take issues with the topic, but this was degenerating into a competitive match. And I didn't want to have that. So that's why I took a 5-minute break. You can talk among yourselves, but that's why I wanted a 5-minute break.
But we are addressing also a situation in which somebody up there, and I'm not going to start pointing fingers because that's not the purpose of this, but when they talk about almost basically saying that their communication has been excellent, and they're praising themselves about the way in which they've been communicating with the public, I read the emails that come to me every single day about the most innate details that are in those, but I still take the time to read them. I have not seen one thing about this until I got hooked up with the petition. If it was not for the petition, I would not have known anything about what you all wanted to discuss with your group that you guys decided to reach out to. I'm not done speaking.
I'm sorry.
You want to talk about being rude and here he is talking about us interrupting your board members? You're a board member. Show respect. Who's your school board member, buddy? Who's your school board member? I just moved here, and I purposely picked out Wrightstown School District or Wrightstown School so my child can go there.
Is it been 5?
I came from another state.
All right, we're going to begin the meeting again, Mr. Grapp.
When someone looks at the board and says it's a threat, you're up in 15, let's see how it goes. That's when you decide to take a break.
Jerry, let's restart the meeting.
I'm done.
I'm going to start it with whoever's here. They're not here. He's not here. I don't care. Okay.
Otherwise, you're going to continue.
All right, we're going to re-adjourn after a small break. We will continue the discussions. Anybody else want to speak? Where's Mrs. Sexton? Is she coming?
She's in the audience.
Okay. Dr. Foster, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say,
I'm not waiting for him.
I mean, in some respect, this is the first opportunity people could have had to respond to the capital planning committee. So I think the process is working. It's just going to be difficult and people don't understand it. But I did want to say that anyone who has, on the finance.
Meeting is called to order.
Yeah.
I recognize Dr. Foster.
And
Go ahead.
I'll just repeat what I said. The way this has been moving, people volunteered for a committee. There were listservs that were sent out for volunteers. A large number of people stepped forward to volunteer and spent a lot of time at it. And then they just came back with their recommendations. And so this is really the first opportunity the community could have had to hear about it, and we've just started discussing the recommendations. This is just the beginning. So it's not like we have made decisions. Some of us had made remarks saying, well, enrollment's down hundreds and hundreds of children. What are we going to do about it? That's a fair question. So we're in the beginning of this process. We're not at the end. We're at the beginning. So I hope people can hang in there. But I just wanted to say for the Finance Committee that it's pretty clear there was a right-on remark in public comment saying that there were concerns about the accuracy of the savings estimates for things like closing schools. That's a fair criticism. I want to make sure that the Finance Committee is open and available to do the work of the board and work with the administration to answer specific questions. And so if
That's-
tonight anyone has anything, we'll tee it up for finance. And if people want to come to finance to see how that's working and whether it makes any sense or not, I just wanted to offer that.
Well, I think we do. I mean, the goal here is we need suggestions on how you want to move forward. So
Right.
that's the question. So my thought was, to that very point about finances, is to give this to the administration of the commonalities. Are the numbers right? Do they look nice? What are the timeframes? Like, I'd like some feedback from them. That's what I was looking for. We've had, and I know they've used the administration, so I'm not saying it's wrong, but I think now that the recommendations are fully formed, it'd be good to have feedback from the administration.
And how they would actually do it. I agree with Denise, but on some things I don't. I'd rather not look at individual situations to make a decision. I'd like to look at the entire piece and stage it over time. What I've always talked about is the need to have a plan, so that if so you're spending efficiently, you're doing the right things, you're not doing things without considering where you could be. So for me, it's about getting to that place where we have a plan, and the commonalities are a great piece, place to start. But again, for me, having the administration who is, has run this operation for a long time, being able to take 3 public recommendations and talk about how it would really be done, the common pieces and what they might suggest would be helpful for me
The thing,
in order to make decisions.
though, I just want to give you food for thought. The thing I worry about that, because I think I agree on taking the middle schools, is that people said they didn't hear, they didn't know what was going on. I think if we took pieces and said we're discussing middle schools, people clearly hear that. If we say we're doing the whole thing, and maybe the elementary's part of it, Rolling Hills is part, or Wrightstown is part, and the middle school's part, like, I'm afraid the people who care about a certain thing will feel like they didn't hear about their
And I want to be
piece.
clear, I am not prepared to vote on any one little piece of something and then jump to the next.
It's more.
So it's not about the vote. I'm talking about productive conversation so that things get well vetted and a topic can get well fleshed out.
That's
So
what
that's
I'm talking
my
about.
suggestion.
That's where I agree with you.
I would never, ever say, well, let's vote on what we're going to do first, and then we'll worry about the rest later, because I think that, in some part, has led us to where we are right now.
And that's where I agree with you. I just am not sure what I would like to take
Just
on
my
first, and that's why when
Oh, so you wanna wait to
and that's
decide.
why when they put these
I
things
get it.
together, it would be helpful for me to see how it could be staged, what they would look at, and then at that point, we can start to talk about where we want to focus our efforts, get the public involved.
See, here, was it Dickens who said, if you like the sausage or the law, don't watch either one being made. And that's the struggle here, which is, even if you think of the way an artist, I watched something the other day about how an artist sketches in the main concepts off his artwork and then starts to flesh them in. But when they first get sketched in, it's a working model, and it may change a lot, but that's where it is first. And our problem is we do these things publicly, so that even as it comes up as a concept, even though it's rough, we will get excitement within the community and passion within the community. One of the other struggles we have, and I'm still fixated on the communication, one of the problems we have is that when you communicate, obviously the persons who are going to be affected immediately look at it and are concerned, but the peripheral people less so. When, if they're the people, when we were redistricting Richboro Middle School, and where was it going to go, those people were very concerned, but the people representing other parts of South or other parts of North, they weren't so concerned, but it impacts them too because their school builds up. But Denise, in looking at you, it occurs to me, and again, I guess I'm fixated on how to make the communication. You were an officer at one point for one of the PTOs, and I remember that you would dutifully attend many board meetings, and you had copious notes, long notes. But part of it was, she was the representative of that school as a PTO member, and took those notes back to her PTO because she had a feeling for what their concerns were, whether it was how the grades were associated, what the points were associated with AP courses versus accelerated courses, whether it had to do. So maybe one of the things we would look to understand is, how do you get a representative from each of the schools? We have a number of schools. Each school has a home and school, a PTO, whatever we
They
want to
used
call
to
it.
have these board
liaisons.
Liaisons.
But so maybe the point is that maybe we try to work through those so that that organization then just helps to promote back through the individual PTOs, with a sense that that representative of that PTO has an idea of what their people are interested in prospectively. I just put it forward, that
I
may
would
be
also
something.
just say that this criticism tonight is probably the best thing to help our communication, because now everybody's talking about it, and, you know, people here will tell other people, you need to go to the Council Rock website, you need to see what's going on, subscribe to the listserv, read the listserv, you know, read the newspaper, those kinds of things. So hopefully, you know, this is just the start of where we can improve, but
I think the point is, that comes out of that, is that, and it is proven by in evidence here today, someone telling you something, even, you know, they even whisper down the line, even so, someone telling you something is more impactful than listserv, than notice in the newspaper, so that's why I put forward the idea that, and it's not set in stone, and we have to see if they want to cooperate, but that PTO is, you tell two friends and they tell two friends. That's how it starts, and maybe that works.
I think Mr. Abramson had something to say about.
Yeah, in moving forward, I had an idea.
Into the mic. Hear you.
No, I know we all may have ideas. Nobody's made up their mind definitely yet. But there's going to be components that we're going to have to decide on. So I'm thinking, in moving forward, why not think about doing it this way first? Having a discussion from the bottom up. Will we have full-day kindergarten? Have a discussion on that. Have a discussion on the grade configuration. Again, moving from the bottom up. Should it be K to 5 or K to 6? And then have a discussion on the class size. Because once we do those components, I think that will help us in deciding what to do with the buildings. So that's a suggestion.
I just want to say that the academic standards meetings for the year have been pretty much plotted out. And in September, we will have a discussion about full-day kindergarten, and we will be talking about class sizes in November. So it's not in this meeting, but in planning the topics for the upcoming year, you know, the capital planning related issues, you know, had impact on how we were going to discuss it.
But I think, with all due respect, I think that's also should be discussed publicly at a board meeting, so the community will hear it if they're not here.
My only concern is if we flesh out all the topics before we actually get to, I mean, there's so many topics, so if we wait to flesh everything out, this is just dragging it out. So in the spirit of utilizing our time well, if we can relegate some of the discussions to committee meetings, you know, and then decide afterward, you know, and maybe, and if it means coming back, I'm just saying
Yeah,
that.
but not everybody can make those committee meetings. There are often at times that I can't make. But I don't know how we can make a decision with regard to closing any school unless we first know the class sizes and the grade configuration, and if there's going to be a full-day kindergarten. I think those are decisions that have to
Well, in a way, those were in the commonality. So if a majority of us want to talk about the commonalities didn't include full day. It didn't include reconfiguring our grade. So that's my response to that.
And my response would be, just because it's not a commonality of all of those, it still is deserving board discussion. So you can start with what's common, but again, we can't move on. I don't think we can move on until we have those discussions with regard to full-day kindergarten class size and grade configuration. Otherwise, we could never make a decision, or we could never make an informed decision with regard to closing any school.
I don't know that that's true. I don't agree with that at all. And in truth, we have already spent a whole year. These committees have spent the whole year looking into each of these items, into class size. We have a class size policy anyhow right now. We're pretty much trying to follow it. That would be the full-day kindergarten, the cost of that, the number of teachers that would need to be hired. All of that was looked at by those three committees. And while one said they would like to see it, they know it's not affordable. The other two said no. It is, to me, to go back and rehash those details right now will slow this process down. And truthfully, Rick, the truck is coming. And when it hits, when we get squeezed, what are we going to lose? What are we going to lose? Is it going to be AP classes? Is it going to be higher class size numbers than we want across the whole district because we haven't taken action? We have lost renovations to buildings that we shouldn't be using. We cannot afford, that's the one thing all three of them told us, we cannot afford not to act. And so this year, no, we are status quo. But in this status quo, we have to act enough so that we give whomever this decision comes down to, whatever, time to make that a thoughtful, well-planned out, reasonable transition time. Not that we make a decision in January and say, or make it in April and say, oh, we're off. There has to be transition for the children. There has to be transition for the families. So I don't want to start at square one. We spent a year, and I know that I listened to all of it, a lot of it.
This board, I don't believe any member of this board ever thought that we would be limited to what was in those recommendations. We can go beyond that.
Yes. We can. We can.
So in doing that, again, I think we have to make these decisions first. We have to know what the class sizes are, and that's for us to decide. Yes, we can consider, and we have to seriously consider the recommendations, but we have to make that decision. Are we going to stay with the current class size policy? Are we going to reduce it? Are we going to have a K to 5, or are we going to have a K to 6? Or are we going to have a full-day kindergarten? We have to make those decisions before we can move on, and I firmly believe that.
I don't think I agree. I think that in a large measure you can develop, first of all, you can develop the general concepts of what you want to do. And the reason I say to do that is because at some point the board needs to come together and identify what does it think is essential and important to do, and whether it's willing to agree to consistent tax increases over time or not. These are things that whatever you want to decide to do, you have to look at it, and whether you do the middle school, whatever you want to decide, get the 3-4 large concepts conceptual. When I hear someone say, well, this street doesn't go and this one street's in, you know what, that's a finesse that I think comes at the end that you have to figure out. There will certainly be tweaks that have to happen, but you need to get the large concepts down and underway. If when you talk about when you talk about full day kindergarten, unfortunately, you're right. You can make the decision. You can get it decided very quickly. It might not decide the way you want.
And that's fine, but we have to make that decision, or how else can we decide whether or not we have enough class spaces in our elementary schools without closing one?
And the problem I have with it is that some of those decisions are great to make a straw man and to go with it, but what happens, unfortunately, is when you create some straw man, such as, well, say this is a working title to do something with, and then that straw man becomes the basis for every decision you make down the road. That if you ultimately say, you know what, that class size doesn't work, it's going to be too small or too large or whatever, all the decisions fall apart thereafter.
And again, for me, I think that's the value of having our administration look at the commonalities and come back with a recommendation that can possibly address some of that stuff. For me, I agree with you from a class size perspective, which is going to, talk about the number of buildings, the number of folks that they're at, the capacity that they're at, the things that have been served up as commonalities. So I think that's something I'd like to hear back from the administration, what those class sizes look like against a plan over time. I think one of the recommendations we saw from the public did address down the road the possibility of looking at full-day kindergarten. I personally don't think that, we're there yet today, but to Jerry's point, I don't think it closes the door. But, again, I think we can address both your concerns by having the administration.
Do you think the administration has the charge from the board as it's assembled now, with all 9 board members that are now, of what direction it would want to take on some of these topics? Do you think the administration has that direction?
Because they can't make, then they can't. For me, it'd be helpful to hear.
No, it's not helpful for them to hear. It's not helpful for us to hear what their perspective is. It's helpful for them to evaluate the proposal based on the direction the board has given them in terms of whatever we want to do. Just conceptually, do we want to do? I'm not saying, which school to close, but Patty speaks rather passionately, and we're 1,000 students down. When you look at 1,000 students down, if you think that they're all distributed equally, 500 of those are in elementary schools. If they're equally distributed, we have 12 grades, 1,000 students, it's 500 elementary school students down. You know, so if that was a going-in position, could they make it work with one elementary school? So Phil had spoken before, he thought always that there would be one, maybe there'd be two. So how does the board want to give, you know, there's a little bit of Bohr's law here, you know, which if gas fills up, grows to expand to fill the vessel assigned to it. There's a little bit of Bohr's law going on, which is the school district will expand to fill the properties that are allotted to it. What do you want to challenge? How do you want to give Mark direction to say, assume one less building at this level? That's what the board, sorry.
No, that's okay, and I agree with Rick, by the way. I think that we have to have public discussion about all these different, I think this is great information. I've said in the past that I appreciate all the work that the committee's done, but it's our responsibility to make these decisions and have these deliberations in public. I think it's completely irresponsible for us to hand it off to the administration and say, give us your recommendation, because then it's harder for us to pull the weeds out of there. And I wouldn't want to be Mark Klein or Bob or anybody else involved in making that recommendation from here. And I think that's the easy way out.
If you think that's what I said, I didn't say recommendations. I want them to.
I'm not looking to you.
I guess that my question would be is, Doug and Mark, are there things in the commonalities, the things that were recommended by all three committees that you think did mean clarified, that the finances have to be around? That's what I was looking for. Their kind of eyeball as the people in the trenches of the things that were commonly recommended to us to have more detail behind them so we could have discussion on them. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for a chance for them to respond to them. Oh, you know, two committees said this, but here's some other facts maybe they didn't know. I was looking for, I mean, so you two think we should talk about those topics. Like, we need to come to a decision. These people all came here to hear, what are we doing next? What are we talking about? When are we talking about it? I mean, we can keep going on like this
I think we
all
should
night.
have work sessions with just this on the agenda, because we're sitting.
Okay,
here
so their
with
suggestion
other
one, I
things.
want to know if others agree. Their suggestion, we should hold a work session. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'll tell you. Would you want to say it? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It was a hold work session, a work session. So a
sessions.
work session would typically be not televised?
No, it should be.
It would need, if the board's going to meet as a board and discuss this topic, it should be.
Okay, so it would be televised. Let me take that back. But it would be classified as a work session with the only topic being capital planning. Okay, so that was the, if we get to a decision on it, we can.
On that topic, since I held my comments, but because I was checking off when everyone else was saying my own comments, so I appreciate that. But do we have, I'm embarrassed to ask this, but do we have a Facebook page?
Yes.
Yes.
We do.
Okay, so maybe we should
aren't
have.
active on it.
Right.
But we use it to put information that we send out on other mechanisms onto the Facebook page too.
I think that might have been a place that we missed in terms
Absolutely.
of opportunities that we should.
Okay, so we need to do the Facebook page. Does this board want to have its next step be a work session? Why are you laughing?
No, he's right. No, go ahead.
A work session that's announced that we're going to discuss the three recommendations. What is your topic for that work session?
I don't think it should be one work session, and I hate to bring people.
Well, I
in
know.
this,
Okay, so
but I
several,
think
but
that
we got to
should have a
start
schedule-
somewhere.
I agree, but I think that we should have a number of scheduled work sessions. We can have a beginning and an end, right, of those periods of times. It's 2 hours or 3 hours, and we have a few of them, and then we can align the topics of what we're going to talk about.
Okay, do other people want to do that?
I want to use our board meetings. I mean, we filled up every single Thursday this summer with meetings, right? I mean, we're pretty,
They're the work sessions.
you know, and
Listen, it can't be. It just can't. This is a big, important
So I'm not against that. So
Patty,
you
let me
would like
finish.
those work sessions televised? The ones we've already planned to have? Those work sessions that we've already planned to have, instead of just doing them in the little room, you would like us to do them in this room?
I would.
With the television.
Because consistent, and I didn't have that opinion until tonight, but what I heard consistently from people was we didn't know. And I think that we did everything we normally do to let people know, but clearly there's people that are now informed and want to be involved. This is a big topic that's taken a lot of time already tonight. We still have a lot on the agenda. So I don't want to get anything pushed aside. If we have different meetings set aside, this is just my opinion, but if we have different meetings set aside for this, I think then we're able to flush out, because I felt like Rick had a great idea about talking about these things, and I think it's important, but we're running against time, and nobody wants to be here until midnight, and nobody wants to add other things to the agenda, but I think it's important to have it televised. I know it's an additional cost, but this is something that needs to be talked about.
I think our subcommittee meetings, you can televise those, but what we normally get when we have our meetings over there in that room where nobody shows up, but we advertise them, and they're on our website, if you show up there, you can have a back and forth, and we're all around the table. So, and we can dig into one topic in finance, in facilities. Finance and facilities are going to be working on this topic for the rest of the year. And those meetings are great.
They are great meetings, but there's many people who can't make those meetings, including some board members. And folks can't watch them again on TV. They can't go to YouTube to watch them again to form their opinions and see what they want to come back or contact their elected officials to talk about, because they're not televised.
Some people don't want to stand up here in public and have the back and forth. Some people are much more comfortable in that room.
And some people just would rather watch it at home, and we're giving them the opportunity.
They can read the minutes.
Guys, I just want to say that we as a board, I mean, if we can't decide who's going to take control of this, set an agenda and move this forward, you know, if we can't decide on that, we get a hell of a long year in front of us to decide the really important stuff. So you know, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to propose an agenda, and then you guys can rip it apart and change it how you want. But we need to make practice. I feel like these people and the people who left deserve to know when's the next meeting and what's the topic going to be. And I don't want to oversimplify it. It might be a lot of topics, so you need to know that. But we'll, you know, my thing is people need to know what we're talking about when we're talking about it, so they can come and talk to us about what they think about it. So I would suggest we have a lot on the agenda for August, and I think September people are back at school. So in the effort of communication, I'm going to throw out there that at our first September board meeting, the administration would come back and take the commonalities and start to take topics and say, here's the finances around them. There'd be a presentation at least from that. Then we've had the community's presentation. We'll have had the administration's presentation.
Sounds good.
We then set a second meeting whose only topic is this, so I'm compromising, okay? Compromise, some public, some work sessions. So then we set a work session that says, of those things, we're gonna start to talk about middle schools or whatever the topic is. We'll decide in September. We'll have something from the administration, we had something from the public, that at the topic of our work session, we will discuss class size or middle schools or whatever it is, but we've got to decide. This isn't like, you know, I mean, we could hand this off to the facilities committee, but the facilities committee has routine work. So unfortunately for me, I feel like I'm the one left trying to spearhead this process. I just want to have us on a process where it moves. A lot of people spoke that you want it to happen fast. Well, we need to have a process where we can have discussion, we have information, we have a topic we know we're discussing, to get to a place where then we say to the community, okay, this looks like what the board is looking at, and then frankly, we're probably gonna have to have meetings in the high schools where hundreds of people can come. But we need to move forward, and I'm gonna put out there that the first meeting in September, the administration comes back with that piece. And then frankly, we're gonna need to pick a topic and a date and say, this is what we're gonna talk about.
We need to have the middle school conversation sooner rather than later.
I personally, okay, now Wendy, not president role, Wendy Thomas role, yes, I would agree with that as well. But I would also think that we've gotten a lot of feedback and we have a lot of people tuned in, and I think the piece is, if we picked anything, we haven't heard how the administration sees us rolling that out, or the numbers that the committees did, we haven't had Bob's eyes on.
I'm saying in addition to. I'm not saying I'm disagreeing with your recommendation. I'm saying in addition to, and maybe that's another meeting separate from the business of this board meeting. I'm not sure.
Well, I've heard some people want to talk about mid-schools, and I think I've also heard, and I'm just paraphrasing, that maybe we talk about kindergarten and class size. So, you know, I don't know if at this point you want to wait and see what the administration comes back and see if we can build consensus, or you want to say you want to talk about middle schools first.
So can I ask a question? So let's assume the administration comes back with
Just maybe some
consensus
adjustments or
items.
something, right? Not a
I
record.
think it's very clear what the commonalities are, right? So we can kind
Yes,
of
I
map
think
those
they're
out.
very clear. I don't think the
Are we-
finances on them are very
Just by
clear.
experience, when we sat down and worked out our goals, some things were in the parking lot, right? They were not topics for discussion. So if the administration comes back with 6 commonalities and all-day kindergarten, with that, which I'll say
Right,
publicly,
it's
I
not
don't
one.
agree with, but only because I don't think we can afford it. But if all-day kindergarten is not in those commonalities, is that off the table, or is that
No,
we can still talk
no,
about it?
I'm just saying,
Because that's not how it's worked in the past. I just want to make sure that
no, if we say we want to talk about, it, we want the administration to do some work, and so we need some finances on it, then we ask them. I'm not trying to restrict the conversation. Honestly, I'm trying to move us forward in some fashion.
I think
That's it.
it's just a consolidation of 3 independent recommendations that we've got, putting them together, and us taking a view.
I think we have that, though. We have Doug Taylor. did
What
that.
I guess what I want is what kind of Andy said, I want some finances around it, and I also want some Doug looked at timeframes, because at the end of the day, we have other projects going on, and the committees looked at what they would do, but they didn't necessarily weave into the other things that Doug may have. I'm looking for their 2 cents on timeframe and money, I guess, Mark, to help me make my decisions.
And I definitely have one specific time frame question. I've had some people in the community say there is no way you could close an elementary school for at least 4 years, given our enrollment. I've had other people say you could totally close an elementary school next year. I'm kind of curious. I'd like to hear the administration's perspective on that specific question.
My concern about waiting until September is that at our last facilities meeting, there was conversation about a vote on other things, renovations construction-wise, in September. I am not prepared to vote on that until this discussion takes place. And so, in considering that we want to move that conversation to September, the question becomes to Doug, the implication of delaying what you thought would be voted on in September.
We'll cover that in a timeline for
But
Boy, how does that work? Do you want to have ventriloquist?
One second, I want to be very clear, because the way everything's being phrased, it makes it, you know, we're talking about a topic, and unless you were there, you don't know what the topic is. So I'm going to be very upfront. At our most recently, we spoke to construction managers, we spoke to architects to try and determine who we might be working with, and those were in the general idea of a construction around Newtown Middle School, either a reconstruction or a new building, so that's what we had talked about as talking about in September. Is that correct? That's what you're referring to?
Or other construction possibilities.
But,
yes.
right, okay, it was in that realm of middle school.
But the point was, we were
construction.
having a conversation about moving forward with some of the capital needs of our buildings. And I had thought by waiting until September, we would have had more dialogue as a board over the summer on some of these plans. If the next conversation that we're going to have about the middle schools is in September, I'm just saying, I will vote no for whatever is discussed at that September meeting to commit to something.
I think that one of the struggles that we have as a board is that there are things that are in process now, and there are things that are more strategic, more tactical, and there are things that are strategic. And the middle school thing is now on the cusp of, is it tactical or is it strategic? I will tell the audience too, and I don't want them to read into it, because looking at the agenda tonight, I could see where someone would read into it. Tonight, one of the things will happen is something that was a tactical issue around some work we were going to do in the Wrightstown Elementary School library for maintenance is going to be, the bids are going to be rejected. They're being rejected because of price. They're not being rejected because of there's no foreshadowing, please don't think conspiracy. There's just, we were looking to do something in the library, and the administration, they came back much higher than we anticipated. They're going to be rejected. They're being rejected because they were too pricey, not because of any nefarious thoughts. So just But that's why I want to be careful about the things that became tactical or are strategic. I think that in many ways, the middle schools are actually a tactical thing, so that's where I think that there's a little more time of the essence around those middle school ideas.
And that's why I suggested
I don't
having a
think
conversation sooner.
I'm not opposed to August. I just feel from the communication standpoint that something gets lost in the summer. I was strictly moving it to September because I felt like people start paying attention to their listserv and their notices again at the end of August. So I'm not attached. I didn't ask the administration if they could have their comments back in August. They probably could, but I felt like.
I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
The issue for me is an expectation that the board's going to vote on other things that are directly or indirectly related to this whole picture.
Okay.
So for me, I will not vote without a full picture. So if that conversation is going to happen in September, and there is a lot of merit for waiting for September, the vote relative to architects and construction management for whatever our next project will be has to be delayed for me.
So I just want to say on that, I wanted Newtown to be renovated and or rebuilt 3-4 years ago prior to Goodnow. So that needed to be done way back then. This is not, the renovation of Newtown Middle, like the renovation of Churchville or Holland, is a going forward to keeping this district whole and modern and desirable as a place to send your children to school. Many people spoke here about going to Council Rock North and being in the district a long time. Mr. Bialik went to Newtown Middle. It's no different. He's not that old to me, but he talks about it being no different today than it was when he was there. I bet he can probably even find his locker, you know? So I think that building needed renovation regardless of whatever else we could talk about or whatever, school closing or school opening, that building needs work. And so I hate to see us not have the conversations that lead us to do that, to vote on whether we're going to renovate or whether we're going to build new, or whether, you know, who we want to do this work. I really agree that we have to stay focused on that before we do anything else.
I don't think
make
we
those
can lose
decisions.
sight of the fact, and I respect your position completely, Denise, that we're talking about just a very preliminary step that won't change over time. So while I don't see the harm in starting to simply approve that at this point in time, and I understand the reluctance Denise has in doing so, I don't see that we couldn't move forward in that process. That is not choosing a school for me, but you have been very clear about your position from the absolute outset. We're not choosing a school to renovate necessarily, we're just choosing to continue to move forward on something that we were moving forward, and I know you didn't vote on that necessarily either. So I don't know, we have to decide if it's part of that bigger, broader discussion in this mix or not, because we're gonna slow things down if we don't, if we go beyond September, certainly.
I think we have to slow it down, though, because there's too much to consider. Patty, I understand your desire to get this done quickly. I really have no problem
I don't want to do
hiring.
it irresponsibly.
Patty, I would love it if you would ever let me finish.
Yes, but
my
you make it
statement.
sound as if I want to be
No.
irresponsible.
That's not what I
That is
said.
not the
No,
case at all.
What I said was I understand your desire to get it done quickly, because you've wanted it done for many years. I understand that.
It's terrible shape.
It is in terrible shape. And I really, after the interviews with our construction manager and the architects who presented, I'm okay with choosing someone to do site plans and things like that, just in case. I'm stopping right there, because we don't know how many kids are going to go there. At the last meeting we had, all of a sudden it became, do we build a new middle school and renovate another at the same time because we have these qualified candidates? I'm still trying to wrap my head around that cost. So we really do have to put the brakes on.
I think, I'm talking about stopping right there too.
We're surrounded by other school districts that have built new schools then closed them. And I don't want to be in that situation. That's my point.
we're also surrounded by school districts that have built new schools, not closed them, renovated their districts and right-sized them,
Right.
so that they were more financially able to bear the cost of education of their students.
But we don't know which kids and how many are going to those schools, and so we just can't build. I'm okay with taking it to that step, where we're choosing the architect and the construction manager just in case, because we've done the work. Let's do the site
Okay,
plan. and
so
stop.
I'm going to say that we're going to have a meeting, the very first meeting in September, and it will be at a public board meeting, and this administration is charged with taking a look at the commonalities and putting some information around it. If there's any other information that you want to provide on non-commonalities, provide it at that time, but we'll look for a presentation from you. Post that meeting, I would expect us to set up a work session, and I will say that we will have, I didn't hear consensus, so I'm going to say that decision's going to get made at that meeting, unless somebody else wants to correct me and think that there's a majority of us who want something else.
I'm confused by the question. What's the question?
So I'm only picking the next step. I'm not going any further than the next step.
In my mind, I see a future with many meetings.
Yes.
Some will
So
not-
do I.
Some perhaps will not be televised because we need venues that are large or whatever, but I foresee and want and encourage many meetings, many opportunities.
Agreed.
And so I think it's too early to understand how that's going to be framed. So that's something that we can think about and help direct in September when the students are back in school, people are not in vacation mode and focused. But for now, if the decision is that we will delay conversation until September, that's fine. But for what goes beyond that, I'd rather wait.
But
and-
I do want to say that I would hope at the September meeting, we would try to leave there with some topics and some meetings for the community to know what we're talking about and when we're talking about it. I mean,
Right.
so
mean,
I
but in all
hope
fairness,
everybody will
September is
give.
filled with back-to-school nights. You know, I mean, we're
Agreed.
competing with
Agreed.
things. So we
Agreed.
need to be able to assess the calendar, understand when things are clear. There's other meetings that are going to be planned outside of this because there are other things going on. So, I mean, it's going to take some thought. I don't think it's something that we can easily address right now.
No, but I am less concerned about the calendar, even though I agree it's crazy. I'm more concerned about building consensus on the topic that we're going to discuss. So, food
Make
for thought.
simple put, make a list of topics. We're going to time box each meeting to be 2.5 hours. We'll start at the top of the list, whatever, I don't care what the list is, start with whatever. Because we're going to talk through it, and when we only get through item 3 of 17 items, at the end of that meeting, we're done for that day, and we come back and we just continue down the list. I just,
Okay,
we can't
fair enough.
think
I'm
that we're
okay
going
with
to, we can't think that we're going to come in.
So email
and-
me your topics if you want.
I can take care of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
done. Mrs. McCasey, email Mrs. McCasey. She's in charge of facilities or whatever you're in charge of anyway, aren't you? Facilities. Done. So I'm going to propose a point of order for the board. I would like to give the board, the public that is left here the opportunity to comment at this time instead of making them wait till the end of the meeting. Is the rest of this board okay with this? We have a whole agenda of other things to do,
It's
so.
10:30. Can I just ask that we limit it to 35 minutes in total?
Okay,
So
we'll
it's
take
a-
35 minutes of
by-
public
by
comment. If you would
And then
like
when
to
do you
line
end?
up.
Because we have an agenda thereafter.
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough, as a frequent flyer at the Finance and Facilities meetings. At the last Finance meeting, I heard talk about some board members had a preference if it was for a specific firm, if it was a renovation, and another firm if it was a new build. So you need to know what you're doing before you vote for the architects, for that reason. And you need to know from finance how much capital monies you can spend before you have these discussions, what the bond, what the debt service will look like, and how that would impact on the budget for taxpayers. So I think that you need to dedicate your finance meeting, the next one, to this topic, and maybe facilities to flush out a little bit before you come in September and have a dedicated meeting. And I don't know how you can vote on an architect if it is true that some of you are leaning towards one firm if the next step is a renovation, and the other if the next step is a new build. And that's my feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Come to the mic, just give us your name again. Thank you.
Amy McIntyre, and my first comment when we heard so much about communication, I would like to volunteer my services. I have over 500 people within the community that are engaged in this issue, so if you want to reach them, please just email me the information that you want your public to hear, and I will get it to them. They're actively engaged in my Facebook page and my petition, so I think that would definitely be a solution for these issues. And I do want to read you the opening to the petition. I haven't emailed it out to you board members yet, but I want you to know that I absolutely understood from the very beginning that these were simply proposals and that this is the very first time you were discussing it. Well, really, that's the point. And it says that in the petition and you'll read it, but I absolutely knew that. And the point was just to get everyone engaged from the very beginning of the decision-making process. I did not think that my school was being closed tonight. I just wanted the community to be aware of this issue and to get involved and to speak their voice early. So one thing that I just am a little bit disappointed about in hearing the conversation is I really do feel that the mentality is still a little bit limited to just thinking of revenues as taxes. And I just really wish that we could get beyond that and start thinking about alternatives, because that's where we're going to get stuck. If closing and consolidating is the cost-saving measures that we think about, and if taxes is our revenue, then yes, it's tough. So I love the idea of sponsorships, public-private partnerships. There's a various, we got to get creative and think outside the box. And I don't think that sponsorships is going to be the answer. But I think if we come up with several unorthodox approaches, we might start to see an impact. And that's the kind of thing that I really would like for the community to work with the board to come up with. And then maybe we don't have to close schools, or as many schools. But I would like to not close any schools, and I certainly don't want to see Wrightstown close. And I know that I think I might have inadvertently offended someone when I said that closing schools is an easy option, and I know it's not emotionally easy for anyone. I think it's just an obvious option. It's done, Nishyamani just voted to do it. So when I say easy, I don't mean that it's easy. It's not easy logistically to figure out how you're going to do it, but it's kind of one of the obvious answers that districts often point to, and I just don't want us to do the obvious. So, and one other comment that I just wanted to make when I was hearing about that optimal school size from, I believe it was proposal 1 of 700. In an elementary school, the optimal school size for learning is 200 to 300. Optimal fiscally, the school size is 450 to 700. So there's a disconnect between what's optimal for learning and optimal for fiscally. But here we are pushing to the very extreme of what is actually optimal fiscally in the proposal, not you, the proposal. But so once you get beyond 700, it's once again inefficient fiscally. So I don't love that we're forcing the issue to be so big. It's almost like we're going to be inefficient once again with that size if you decided to go that route. And the other thing that comes up when you talk about working sessions, I know sometimes in some of the townships working sessions mean no opportunity for public comment, and I think so there would be opportunity for public comment, which is great.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Sorry.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. That's it.
Hi, Jason McIntyre, Amy's husband. I just had a quick thing about transparency. I keep hearing closing schools and redistricting. Those seem to be the two options you guys have whittled it down to. What I want to know is, what were the alternatives that did not make the cut? You had mentioned sponsorships, you looked into a Coca-Cola, blah, blah, blah. Were there others that were final cuts, that were the fourth or fifth option or the sixth option that you guys left out at the last minute? Could those be made public? Would you be willing to be transparent with those and show everybody else what those were? I mean, again, so obviously some people are going to talk about teachers' salaries and teachers' pensions. I understand those may not be on the table at the state level, what have you. But I just think the public would love ulteriors besides closing the school and redistricting. And if, maybe that's not feasible, maybe you guys are just rock solid on those two, and, you know, then we're screwed. But, you know, we really would appreciate it, at least I certainly would, if we would love to see the other options that did not make the cut.
Let me try and answer that. We did, when we got the original proposals, request of the teams if there was anybody within those committees that didn't necessarily agree and had other ideas to come back to us. I don't know if we've gotten any of that. Certainly we should share it if we did.
So you guys did open it and just nobody had it? Right?
Yeah, but the other neat piece today was to see some of those committee people stand forward and put themselves out there, which was new today, and maybe some of that will start to happen. Because speaking for myself, I did not attend any of the committee meetings because I didn't want to be influenced until I heard the final recommendations.
We had two members from the committee who emailed us some additional comments that did not make it. But just to clarify, sir, so the committees may have heard topics that didn't make it to the recommendations. It's not a matter of us being transparent. We weren't there. We didn't have them. So the committee, the people who spoke tonight, they may actually be able to answer some of that question for you, but it wasn't as if there was a written number of things that we as a board decided we're not considering anymore. They spent months talking about them. Now, we did have two committee members that wrote to us and said, my committee recommended X, but I didn't really agree with it, and here's my information. Because we have that open email where people can send us those.
One last thing, are you taking non-committee recommendations at this point, or is that closed?
We haven't made any decisions, so we're taking everything right now. Anything anybody sends in, it gets forwarded to all of us. We are developing a Q&A for people who ask questions. We're in the process of developing that. And
That's what I
Mr.
was going to ask. I mean, because we've gotten a bunch of emails and they get responded to.
I believe Doug's working on it.
And so, in the spirit of transparency, I think it would help the community to see what other community members are asking and get, you know what I mean? Like, the more information that everyone can get, the better. And there have been some really good questions. And not only that, there have been questions that have had misinformation that gets clarified. So getting that out, I think, would be helpful if there could be a link or something.
Mr. McIntyre, just by way
Wait,
of
could you wait 1 second, Jerry?
That's okay. Go ahead, Jerry.
Just by way of example, you know, I thought when we formed the board, when the board formed the committees, one of the things that we wanted to do was give them autonomy and not to predetermine, because we have some pretty strong opinions on various things. We wanted to give them autonomy. I have one pet way that I've always wanted to try and do something, and I sent it to at least one of the committees, if not many of the committees. They chose not to act on it. So,
Do you want to reveal it now for everybody?
I can talk to you about it separately, because it wasn't, they chose not to act on it. Maybe I'll bring it up again in our discussions, but I don't know why they didn't act on it, but I want to, you know, I'll talk to you about it, but it has labor negotiations components, so I don't want to publicly yell it out. But everybody has notions about how to do certain things, but the idea was to let the committees try and put it together. Ultimately, and this is very important, and while I greatly respect both for their personal stamina and their willingness to stand up and say, hey, look, we were the committee, their job was done. They made the recommendations. It's the 9 people who sit here who bear the brunt, and then anybody, you know, in public, the fellow who stood up and said, you know, it's hard to stand up when you know that everybody in the room is against you. Fortunately, he doesn't have to vote on it. It's these 9, us as 9 have to vote on it. So.
If I could, please, Mr. McIntyre, I hear you and your wife talking about alternative revenue streams, which is a little different than some of the answers that you've got. For the last 10 years in Finance Committee, we've looked at a lot of those different options, and some of them, and if you have new ideas, I think you are welcome to Dr. Foster's Finance Committee to come talk about them as ways to look to see if there are alternatives to the way that we look at taxation as the primary methodology by which we raise. So you're welcome to do that. You're welcome to give me a call. I'll give you a long history.
You have a couple common friends. You don't know that yet.
Okay, but please don't hesitate to reach out, and any information that you can share with me, I'll get into the Q&A. But I think I speak for Dr. Foster and Mr. Reinhardt. If you want to talk to us on the finance level about alternative ways of reaching some of our finance goals, you are more than welcome to come join us at those finance committee meetings.
So you're going to put Q&A up?
We'll do our best.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to mislead, because most of the questions that have been asked right now aren't capable of capturing into a Q&A. they were sort of methodology process questions. But as those questions come into capital planning, that email, they cross my desk, I get them to the board, and then when I can, I will respond immediately back to you if they ask a question. So don't hesitate to send those questions out, and we'll collect them and put them out.
Could you set up like a thread, that just like a live thread that's running on the district's website, so people can type their questions and people can have conversations back and forth?
I think that's not a bad idea, but I don't want to be presumptuous to think that everybody that asks a question wants it to go out to 14,000 people too. So if I get that permission, I'll put the name of it out. If not, what the Q&A does is, in fact, connect that thread where it just gives the anonymous question and the district's answer to it, and then you can continue to expand on it. I also commit to you that within the next couple of days, we will get all of these ancillary resources that we talked about tonight, like the Pell study, the Schrader study, those things on that website piece too. So there's a common place where we will start to load all this information. You can find it on a single click.
Go ahead, sorry. Thank you for waiting.
That's okay. This ticking clock is very nerve-wracking. So I am, my name is Heather Brossman. I did Plan 3 for the people who were asking about Plan 3. I was the team leader for that. And one of the things that stands out from this dialogue is I am just a mom. I'm a mom. I have 4 kids. I did my best to fill the classrooms that were empty. I'll try to have more kids and get that done. Because that's one solution, is more kids, right? But our plan, really, we looked very deeply into the community, and I have very good friends at Wrightstown. I went to Rolling Hills. I don't know if that gives me any credibility at all, but all I know is I want the community to know that we really cared. We care about Wrightstown. I don't want Wrightstown to feel like there was anything other than the things we felt were financial issues. And really, it is really hard when you're talking about people issues and you start talking about financial issues. They come in complete conflict with one another sometimes. And I really only joined this group because I read a listserv. I was the PTO president at Richboro Elementary, and I felt like I really don't like the modulars at our school. I don't think it's reflective of Council Rock. And this turned into something much bigger. And you all are now feeling what I felt when I realized what this committee really was. And all of the people in our committee are from such a broad range of ages and experiences with the school or with kids in the school. And I really want you to know that I think everyone that I've met in Council Rock, all of the people who have helped us really care about our school too. So if we can go forward with this dialogue in the vein that we're all in this together, we're all one community. Richboro is a fantastic school. I feel strongly about Richboro as I think you all feel about Wrightstown or Rolling Hills. And I really just want you to know that I really hope there's some other way. If there was a magic stick that we could hit each school and renovate it where it sits, to me that's the best plan. Get rid of the modulars and renovate every school where they sit. Unfortunately, after this year of looking at all this information, that wasn't the possibility. Then is closing the school becomes the obvious thing. It does become the obvious thing. And if there is a magic something to have happen and the community has that answer, I hope you guys email it to them and there is a better answer. Really, I do. So I really thank all of you for your time and suggestions, and I'm sorry if we missed something that you guys come up with, but now I'm glad it's all to you and you can do something great, right? There you go.
I just had 2 points. One, I respect,
I'm sorry.
my name is Sarah Greenstein.
Thanks, Sarah.
I respect that you respect people's vacations, but she talks about the timeline and time crunch. I don't think anybody here, you will get people to come in August. I mean, I don't think anybody's here is willing to wait. I think this is a pressing decision, you know.
We just got some emails about people being away and stuff.
Right,
So
and maybe one committee member could do 1 week or something like that. It doesn't need to be, everybody there at all times, but I think if you're under a time constraint, I respect that, but I think there's no reason to wait until September. I think people will come, I think once you put the information out there, I think people will come. Is there a time limit as to when you have to vote? Like once the committee presents the recommendations, is there a time limit as to when you have to vote? No, it could take 2 years, 5 months, okay. My next point was about commonality. You spoke a lot about the 3 recommendations. Sometimes commonality in the recommendations is not maybe what fits the needs of the community, and I think that commonality also needs to reflect maybe what the needs are of the community or what the community is passionate about. So those are my thoughts.
Kevin Campbell, and I again was on the planning committee for recommendation 2, and I wanted to speak once again because I've heard a lot about what may or may not have been discussed. When we looked at the charge, we took it all the way down to making decisions at the lowest level for the custodian of that school. How does it impact him, or how does it impact the cafeteria workers and what they do each and every day? Again, first and foremost, to reiterate, no decision has been made. These were our best guessed ways to help facilitate an issue that is facing us head on. We looked at the all-day kindergarten. We looked at special education needs and adoptions, alternative education. We looked at primarily removing trailers and how do we do that and where do we put the kids. It wasn't an easy answer, which I thought at first. It rolled into a much bigger problem down the road. We looked at redistricting. We looked at getting out of leases and selling property in ways that would be fiscally responsible to help the board make these decisions. I don't think any of us want to be in their shoes, but it's easy to sit back in the room today and ask about what we looked at. There's a lot of things that were vetted that didn't make to the table because they weren't smart. They might have been emotional, but they weren't smart, and for the board to consider them, it would do an injustice for us. So just like it's easy to sit back in Monday morning quarterback, we took painstaking discussions on each and every topic, and it's not an easy discussion to have. It's not going to be easy discussions to have. Going forward, this is a huge topic. Delaying certain things is a wise decision. Possibly delaying votes on what to do with middle school for the interim might be a wise decision. If this is going to impact the community and the school district and everybody that's involved, the timetables really do need to be looked at. We all said this was going to be emotional. We all said it was going to be a long, painstaking effort. You know, it could take a year. It could take 2 years to iron out where we are. So I believe we've done our due diligence to provide you what you need to look ahead, and there's more due diligence that you all have to do. I would just say if it takes a year to have these meetings, to get everybody's input, unfortunately, that might be what it takes. But at the end of that year, there's got to be a beginning and an end to these meetings. But at the end of that, there's got to be a formulated plan, and hopefully we can come together as a community, either like it or don't, and agree that it was the best choice moving forward. Not everyone's going to be happy. We have to accept that at the end of the day. So that's all I had to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our board agenda, to the rest of the board agenda, I should say. And please feel free to stay. But if you don't, we'll see you all again soon. We have one board meeting in August.
Are you talking to the audience or to the board members?
Board members don't go anywhere. Okay, Mrs. Sexton, can you make the first motion?
I can try.
Consent agenda.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay,
Here we
thanks.
go. Just give me a second. I move to approve the consent agenda items A through M as contained in the attachments to this agenda, subject to audit.
Second.
Mr. Grubb, second.
Question.
What?
I have a question, sorry.
Go ahead.
You make me roll your eyes. Help me to understand under G, the Sweet Stevens thing. Was there a discussion item about this?
Dr. Lambert briefed you on the pool agreement that we were entering into that would help us with, it's not specific services. In fact, that was a couple months ago. I'm surprised that it took us this long to get that before you, but Yes, we had talked about that before. I think it actually came to the board.
Well, this was
stopped.
It stopped because that structure talked about a whole thing about having their online services available, and they were going to provide this. And this agreement, as I look at it, doesn't speak to any of that.
Correct.
So I don't know what
Chuck sent us, did you see the?
Yes. Dr. Lambert sent you an overview.
People
of
said
this.
before, you don't always get through your email.
This agreement is
Chuck said it very
responsive to
lengthy.
the comments that you made at the meeting prior to this about some of the things that you didn't want to see in the pool agreement.
All right, well, if everybody else agrees, when I vote no on this one item, that'll be fine. But I don't agree with this item because it still puts us in an awkward spot in terms of that it's 10 days of consulting, 10 full days of consulting, face-to-face file reviews, and then if they give us an opinion of how to do something or what their stance is, then when we move forward with it and we engage our regular counsel to take that to a due process hearing or whatever we choose to do, they may disagree with what the first attorney suggested or their approach. And I don't understand or value the rest.
Again, most of this is for training and consultation with respect to larger issues. They don't deal with it. We would always default to Rob's firm and to Eastburn and Gray for the specific student issues that we're dealing with.
When I vote no on this, that's reflected in my...
Any other questions? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Bialik?
Yes, with the exception of item K, the treasurer's report. And my concern is, as always, the funds and where they're held and insurance coverages.
Dr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Grupp?
With the exception of, within item G, the Sweet Stevens, Katz, and Williams contract, I will not agree to that one. I agree to the rest of the consent agenda.
Okay. Mrs. McKessie?
Yes.
Mrs. Sexton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Abramson?
Yes.
Mr. Block, can you take item number 1?
I move to approve the personnel actions and extended school year listing as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
Questions for Ms. Torelli?
Hearing no questions, I will ask that the secretary record the motion as passing by unanimous consent. Dr. Foster?
In the future, can we receive that in advance of the summer term? This is, we can't get that?
No, I'm trying to understand what that question was.
This was the extended school year positions and how much we were going to pay the people and what rates. So it doesn't give how many hours. It just tells you extended school year and this is the rate. So
the rate is contractual.
Right. How many hours have we contracted with each of these people for?
I'm searching for it on the...
It's tracked throughout the summer by the Special Services Department, so it could vary.
I understand. I think my request is, while I understand it's, and my agreement with it at this point is simply because it's a fait accompli. These people already worked. But it would be good to get an estimate in the future going forward. Extended school year is, in large measure, a special education cost. And I would like to track special education costs and know how much we spent on it. To know that as you're going into it, that you anticipate this many hours for this person, tells us that over the course of the year, course of the summer, will we be spending $250,000 or $500,000 on extended school year?
We can do that for you in the future.
That's what I ask for next year. But this year is a fait accompli, which is why I didn't take issue with the vote then.
Dr. Foster, can you read item or present item number 2, please?
I move to reject all bids for the Wrightstown Elementary School library renovations.
Second.
We pretty much briefed you with this on facilities, unless you have questions for Doug or I.
Jerry mentioned it before, but there should be a comment made that this has nothing to do with the recommendations of the committees.
Yes, this is all about cost, and these bids came in way higher than we estimated.
It was actually, the bids came in before the reports came back, didn't they?
Bids came in, yes.
Didn't the bids come in before the reports, the recommendations came back?
Yeah.
It's just that the timing of the motion is unfortunate.
Oh, absolutely. I've fielded many questions on that.
Okay, hearing no issues, I'm asking the secretary to record the motion as passing by unanimous consent. Mr. Abramson, would you read item number 3?
I move to approve Holland Elementary Additions and Renovations Project Change Order Number EC02 in the credit amount of $101.17. And I move to approve Holland Elementary Additions and Renovations Project Change Order Number MC02 in the credit amount of $106,000 and $106,103.
Second.
Questions?
Nothing better than receiving money back in projects. Both of these are credit change orders, right, Doug?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Hearing no questions, I ask the secretary to approve the record the motion as passing by unanimous consent. Ms. Brooks, items number 4.
I move to award the 2015 utility van bid number 14-30 to Andrew Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram at the total cost not to exceed $32,104, subject to audit.
Second.
Dr. Lambert briefed you on the, oh, I'm sorry, no, that's not the wrong Vance. Go ahead.
I wanted to
Too many
thank
Vans
Bob.
going by.
This is a utility bid, and Bob had rebid this, and as you'll note now, there are a number of stated equivalents where previously this was bid as what came to be just a Ford vehicle or just a Ram vehicle. I don't know what it was at the time. So I appreciate that you've now explored the possibility of how to do equivalent bids for what I consider to be commodities, and I appreciate you putting the effort into that.
This is to replace the electrician's van that was in an accident last year, and we received $9,718 for the replacement of the van that was demolished in the accident by the other insurance company. So we have to pay the balance.
Well, that van was depreciated. That was...
Yes, that was an old van.
Right.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I ask that the secretary record the motion as passing by unanimous consent with the exception of Ms. McKessie, who stepped out for a moment. Okay, where are we? Mr. Bilek, do item number 5.
I move to award the fluke testing equipment and Polycom IP telephone bid number 14-33, Category 1, fluke testing equipment to Global Gov Ed Solutions at a total cost not to exceed $10,299, subject to audit. And Category 2, Polycom telephones to Ask Technologies Incorporated at a total cost not to exceed $3,960, subject to audit. Funding for both Category 1 and Category 2 awards come from the Goodnow Elementary School Capital Project Fund as part of the furniture, fixture, and equipment budget.
Keep going. Right further.
What's that?
The IT equipment's also on item number 5.
I apologize.
That's okay.
I also move to reject the 2014-2015 IT equipment bid number 1431, Categories 4 and 5, Meraki 48 port gigabyte PoE switches, MS220 and MS320.
Second.
What are they?
Eliminate the POEs, huh?
That was impressive.
That's what POEs stand for.
Anyone else? Questions? Comments?
So when we reject these, what happens? What's the story?
Mr. Frederickson?
On the rejection of
It just means we're not going to buy them.
That we don't need them, or?
We're not going to buy them. These particular switches were purchased to replace switches to high schools, but they don't support a feature that I need.
Okay.
They've informed me that it will be there in September.
Okay.
I need them now, so we're going to just delay it till the future.
So I thought I remember something like this coming up before, where there was a software patch that would make the switches.
We discussed this at the last board meeting.
Right.
But we didn't reject them because I was waiting to hear back from them.
Okay,
I heard back
thanks.
from them, so.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? Hearing no objection, I ask the secretary to record the motion as passing by unanimous consent. Ms. McKessie, can you take item number 6?
I move to approve the temporary construction easement agreement for the house property in the form attached here too.
Second.
You can tell when the solicitor drafts a motion. Rob, you want to take this one since it's coming from your office in your hand?
Sure, this is just an agreement that grants the district access to the house property in order to comply with its longstanding obligation to remove certain structures that exist on that property. It's an obligation that exists as a result of the agreement of sale pursuant to which the district purchased the adjacent property. And so this just simply allows the district to do what it agreed to do many years ago.
And we never found anyone to take this barn wood, or we decided not to.
This is the easement that permits whoever decides to do that to get on the property.
Okay, so we're still hopeful.
This is, without this easement,
Right, no, I get that.
nobody has the right to get on the property to take the barn down, which is our obligation to take it down.
There's still hope for that.
There's still hope, okay. There's a barn available, right? Basically.
Wood.
Wood.
They don't need the barn.
Well, they could take it down
Take the
carefully
wood.
and they could rebuild the barn.
They could, and that could be reflected in the bids. We determined that we would publicly bid this and allow the outside companies to come in and provide us with numbers to see if there's any cost savings to open it up, instead of just awarding it to a single guy that wants to salvage the barn. And I'm waiting for the actual proposal from the engineer to document this project, and when I get that, I'll share it with the board.
Can't we make a school out of that one? Sorry, Steve.
It's not laminated.
All right. Any objections? Hearing no objections, I ask for the secretary to record the motion as passing by unanimous consent. Mr. Cox, solicitor's report.
There was an executive session prior to tonight's meeting to discuss a confidential personnel matter, and other than that, I don't have anything to add to that report.
Okay, board items.
I have just two comments. I think we spoke last time about Barbara Buckman passing, our
We did.
long-term tax collector. I learned her son Paul passed on Monday. Paul was a graduate of Council Rock in my class, so I just want to acknowledge that. He'll be well missed seeing him around town. To the people who are here tonight, I'm a bit, don't take this the wrong way, but I hope that future meetings you'll stick around to see the rest of the agenda so you can see the totality of the decisions we have to make and not just in the vacuum of your personal school. So please don't take that as a criticism, but when everyone filed out and we had this large agenda, I was a bit disappointed. Those of you that stuck around, though, I appreciate it.
Well, and I think that's the important issue, which is how do you know who wants to be communicated to about what? That, you know, these items, are they consequential to people or not? It's a challenge for this board to make that communication.
I would like to mention another update. Mr. Block did some work on coalescing some of our information from our initiatives. If you all recall, we did have workshops this year and have initiatives. So we decided with everything happening tonight, he would give an update and we'd share that in the August meeting. So, yes?
Yeah, I would say that one of the takeaways from the last session we have is that there would be deliverables on June 1st from the superintendent to outlay some of the plans. We've got that. We've opted to not share tonight just because of the totality of what we had. So we'll share all that and
We're putting it all together and we'll put it out,
Yeah.
just so people know what's going on. We're moving forward on that. Is that it? Anybody else on the board? Okay.
Well,
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Doctor.
Yeah.
Well,
Hey,
normally
thanks.
public comment first.
No, board.
Yeah, board items are, this is a stupid idea, but here we are, it's what, is it midnight or 11? I don't know. Why not? So, people don't have much time to digest information, and people don't read the newspaper, even though they should, the press is gone too. But, if somebody had the energy, and I don't know who it would be, I would nominate the president to do it. But at the end of the meeting, if there was a magic way to summarize the highlights of the meeting and then put that at the front of the video, I'm just saying if somebody could do it. Because a lot of this is as a person I've talked to many times said widgets. I think you say widgets?
No widgets, that's a technology word.
No, you talk about we're voting on widget. A lot of the stuff we do is just housekeeping. It's really important, and hundreds of thousands of dollars move from A to B to C, but it doesn't catch the eye. Now, the press is desperately looking for, as Mr. McGill says, a golden nugget out of all of this chat. But if there's any, to use the term in the audience, thread, something that might be of interest, to squeeze this whole meeting down. The minutes are great, but they're for professionals like us to read.
Bill, the change
from a flash-based, the change in from a flash-based video, which we used to do when we hosted it, to now being hosted on YouTube.
Well, that's
the YouTube video goes up within 3 or 4 days. It's up by Monday, it's up. The other thing that happens within that is you can index that video to start at the second you want it to start. So it is possible that if someone wanted to, they could take the agenda that we have and actually put a link in the agenda to the YouTube to start that when you want to see the discussion about this, that's the second it starts. But you could do that. Right. And since you volunteered.
No, I volunteered the president. So, but you know, to the YouTube, to the YouTube point, is there any way that our videos could be as good and easy and fast as YouTube? Because we all know what happens when you go. I know, but you know what happens when you go to YouTube? You got to watch an ad. So sooner or later, there's going to be an ad associated with your face that I don't know. You may not want it there. So
what are we talking about?
I'm talking about earlier in the evening. We talked about sponsorships. We talked about Philadelphia Coke. So now we're putting our meetings out where? On YouTube, which is a mechanism for selling advertisements. Can we do better? Can we make the videos work better on our site so that people don't have to watch ads to see our meetings? That's the...
Do you have to watch ads to see me? I never saw that.
Well, if you...
I watched it on YouTube and I didn't see that.
No, but if you go to YouTube and click on things...
No, but if things people want to see...
They have that right.
If you see something
Sooner
that's
or
got
later.
a million views, there'll be an ad. I don't think people are clamoring to put ads on.
It's up to YouTube, whether there's an ad or not.
From my
let's hope we
perspective,
get that many views.
by putting it on YouTube, it's something that we're not hosting. We have basically unlimited bandwidth because there are so many people clamoring to see our meetings simultaneously. And you know, technologically better. I'm willing, you know, if you don't like it, I guess you could wait for the book to come out, but just go see the movie. You pay a 15-second ad, you can then watch 3 hours. God bless you.
Okay, we need to have our final public comment. So public comment is an opportunity, and I did not read this when I interjected one, I apologize. For members of the public to address the board, we would ask you to limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes and consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching this broadcast live on CRTV. Have at it, Mr. McGill.
Okay, just a kind of a rhetorical question and a comment. The barn that's on the house tract, has anybody looked at what kind of wood that barn is made out of?
Mr. Taylor?
It's something you should consider because the reason I ask is because if it's American chestnut, that wood is worth a fortune, okay? You know, American chestnut was wiped out in the early 1900s, but the wood is essentially rot-free, and it goes for big bucks. So if you haven't checked it out, I suggest that you do so before you just put it up for sale.
Thank you.
Doug, since we have the easement now, why don't you go grab a board and make it available for inspection? Because, no, seriously, I'm being very serious, because as the bidders come to look at it, that would be a consideration, how they want to bid it.
Any
Steve, to
other
your
public
point,
comment?
as valuable as it may be, if we can't get it taken down, we're going to pay it to take it down.
I'm sorry, I would like to make a comment on that. I think we should also look at, honestly, and all joking aside, if we could repurpose that wood. If we're doing renovations and if we're looking at a new building, it could be used as a floor. I have reclaimed barn wood in my house and floors, and that would be really neat to see something that came from part of our district to be part of the administration office or wherever it could fit in. Could we look at that? Great.
I have to tell you, just so you know, we tried to do that with the bleachers at North, because they were huge amounts of wood. You could have paneled entire buildings with them. Nobody wanted them, because that would have been cool.
I'm talking about us using it, the school district.
We look to use it too.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
She said she was making a lot of force, so she wasn't.
Don't shoot the messenger.
No, I didn't. But thank you.